Chapter 343. The war in the Yang region had just ended, and all kinds of monsters had come out. Jiang Wang had to be careful. He immediately stopped cultivating and followed Dugu Xiao to the front yard. He didn't have any good channels for the time being, so he had asked Cheng Gung Sheng to buy the Meridian unlocking pill for Dugu Xiao. It would be completed in a few days. Jiang Wang didn't have to worry about the layout of the yard, leaving it all to Dugu Xiao. He didn't care much about these things, but he did feel a lot more comfortable. The visitor was waiting in the front yard. It was a skinny, yellow-faced old monk. He wore a coarse hemp robe and a pair of straw sandals. His exposed toes were clearly black and dirty. While Jiang Wang was sizing him up, he was also sizing up Jiang Wang. "Master, why are you here?" Jiang Wang asked. The yellow-faced old monk saluted with one hand. "I came because of fate." Jiang Wang didn't pick up the conversation and deliberately said, "If you're asking for alms, I can arrange a vegetarian meal." The yellow-faced old monk nodded. "If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you." Jiang Wang was speechless. If it was just asking for alms, Dugu Xiao would have arranged it long ago. This old monk must have waited until now for some other purpose. Moreover, his aura was faintly discernible, and his cultivation was unfathomable. Jiang Wang didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble, so he tried to restrain his curiosity when he didn't know who the enemy was. Therefore, he deliberately asked for alms to stop him, but he didn't expect the old monk to take advantage of the situation. He really wanted to ask for alms. Jiang Wang was the lord of Qingyang town, so he could still afford a vegetarian meal. However, Dugu Xiao's expression didn't look so good as she stared at the stacked bowls. She was used to living a hard life, so she knew how to be thrifty. It wasn't that she hadn't seen monks asking for alms in the past, but they usually only asked for a bowl of vegetarian rice and a few pieces of green vegetables. How could they eat more than 20 bowls of rice? They even ate 5 plates of green vegetables. However, Jiang Wang didn't say anything, so she had to endure it. However, when he went to the kitchen, he secretly told the monk to sprinkle more salt so that the monk who was reincarnated from starvation would be full from the salty food and would not eat too much. The yellow-faced old monk was very devout when he ate. He didn't say anything and just stared at the food, chewing slowly. It looked very meticulous, but it wasn't slow when eaten. The bowls and plates were stacked higher and higher, and the chef was so tired that he had to change one. It was impossible for Jiang Wang to let such a powerhouse of unknown origin roam freely, so he maintained his patience and accompanied him from the side. It was inconvenient for him to explore the fog of obscurity, but he could just sit there and nurture his Tao energy. When there were 40 empty bowls and 9 empty plates, the yellow-faced old monk finally put down his chopsticks. He rubbed his stomach and let out a sigh of relief. "Master, are you done?" Jiang Wang asked. "You can't use up all your power and enjoy all your blessings." The old monk said seriously, "Half full is enough, but you must exercise restraint." "Thank you for your advice." The yellow-faced old monk glanced at him with an expression that said, "This child is worth teaching." On the other hand, Dugu Xiao couldn't stand by and watch. He helped the servants clear away the bowls and plates, while he himself hid outside. "Amipa." The yellow-faced old monk saluted with one hand. Only now did he remember to introduce himself. This old monk, Ku Ju, must have heard a benefactor's name. In terms of etiquette, this monk was quite old. As long as it wasn't too excessive, it wasn't good to be disrespectful. Although Jiang Wang had never heard of this Master Ku Ju before, he still played along. Master's virtuous reputation is widespread. I've heard of it before. I wonder if Master's visit this time. It's all fate. The yellow-faced old monk's wrinkled face seemed to relax. "This old monk and you are fated." Before Jiang Wang could say anything, Ku Ju continued. "Everyone knows that this old monk is a reasonable person." He looked Jiang Wang up and down. The more he looked, the happier he became. "How can this old monk accept your kindness for free?" Before Jiang Wang could say, "You're too courteous," the yellow-faced old monk said, "I'll pass on my mantle to you. Pack up your things and follow me into the temple. I'll teach you everything I've learned in my lifetime. In less than 30 years, you'll be like this old monk, respected by the world. Forget it. I'm a monk, so there's nothing to pack. Let's go. As he spoke, he pulled Jiang Wang along. Hold on. Jiang Wang jumped far away with a single step. Did he lose his mind? No matter what, he was still an 18-year-old expert in the soaring dragon realm, a man of Qingyang Town. He had the talent, the strength, and the potential. His forces were also developing. How could he be so brainless as to ask him to leave everything behind and become a monk with him? If it weren't for the fact that this old monk had some cultivation and didn't seem like a complete fool, Jiang Wang would have already left in a huff. His mind was in a mess, but he still maintained basic courtesy. Master, perhaps there's some misunderstanding. I have no plans to become a monk. Kuju looked somewhat dissatisfied. You don't have any plans now, but how do you know you won't have any in the future? I don't know, but do you? Jiang Wang tried to be as calm as possible. Not now, and probably not in the future. You can only represent the present you, not the future you. Monk Juku walked over as he spoke. Don't waste time. Hurry up and acknowledge me as your master. Jiang Wang retreated vigilantly, feeling somewhat dissatisfied. Master, please conduct yourself with dignity and don't pester endlessly. Child, why won't you listen to my advice? Juku frowned. I've been through this before, so why would I lie to you? Before I became a monk, I was also dressed in fine clothes and rode on fine horses. I thought I had limitless glory, but the glory and splendor were like bubbles. Only after I converted to Buddhism did I finally obtain the supreme peace. Jiang Wang couldn't help but look at his linen monk robe and then at his exposed straw shoes. Although he didn't care about enjoyment like Zhao Ruqing, he didn't live so half-heartedly. If this was peace, it really wasn't necessary. Noticing Jiang Wang's gaze, Zhu Ku's frown deepened. Mortal riches and honor are fleeting clouds. Can't you see this? Jiang Wang said in a muffled voice, I don't have the root of wisdom. Finally, it was monk Zhu Ku's turn to be silent. The yellow-faced monk was silent for a while, then forced a smile. Don't worry, I'm used to turning stone into gold. This person's skin was thicker than the Kuan skin drum. He hadn't even agreed to it, but he was already calling himself master. I don't need you to point at me. I'm real gold. The word master left him with a bad memory. Up until now, he had only truly acknowledged Dong. From the initial wariness, to the subsequent trust, and then to the final deception, Jiang Wang's pride was provoked. He didn't want to accompany him anymore, so he turned and walked out. But for some reason, after taking a few steps, his eyes froze, and he found himself back in his original position. What kind of trick was this? He didn't even notice it. Jiang Wang held his sword and bent. Master, what do you mean by this? Good disciple, don't fight with your master. You have no respect for your master. As Zhu Ku spoke, he stretched his hand forward. His feet didn't move, but Sauvignon Annunciation was already in his hand. Jiang Wang didn't even have time to react, and his hands were already empty. Those who use the sword lose their sword, and those who decide their fate lose their life. The sword is not bad, but it's too fierce. Zhu Ku held his sword horizontally in front of him and stretched out his hand. Today, I have a good disciple. I don't have anything else on me, so I'll help you suppress it. A ray of Buddhist light flashed on Sauvignon Annunciation, and Zhu Ku threw it away. Jiang Wang didn't notice the process, and his sword returned to his hand. He lived with this sword day and night, and they were one. He didn't see any changes on Sauvignon Annunciation, but he did feel that something was different. Chapter 344. Jiang Wang had completely extinguished any thoughts of using force after regaining somniferous yearning. No matter how unreliable this old monk Kuju was, his unfathomable strength was still there. He couldn't even see how big the gap was between them, much less close it. He couldn't leave even if he wanted to, as his previous actions were proof of that. Fortunately, this yellow-faced old monk didn't seem to have any ill intentions. Jiang Wang sighed. Great master, if you really lack disciples, there's someone in my town who doesn't care about life and death. I think he's very wise. He only thought to himself, Qian, this great master is so strong, It wouldn't be a disgrace to you to be his disciple. What flying sword? 3 ultimate peaks. That's all in the past. Forget about it. He's no good. Kuju flatly refused. Who knows when he'll be gone? I'm still counting on my disciples to observe filial piety. I definitely can't accept this jinx. From the old monk's words, he seemed to have some understanding of Qian's background. But he didn't know why he called Qian a jinx. These words were very unpleasant. But now wasn't the time to dwell on this. Jiang Wang said bitterly, "Great master, how did I catch your eye?" "Fate," Kuju said firmly. Jiang Wang. This kind of reason couldn't be changed. Kuju seemed to know that these words weren't very convincing. So he added, "You've protected the people here and brought peace to this area. You have a compassionate heart, the will of Bodhi, and the will of Buddha." Jiang Wang hurriedly said, "In terms of compassionate heart, there's a person in the Yang Kingdom who's lived countless lives and is revered by tens of thousands. It's that Hingyang County Provost Huang Yi." Unexpectedly, this yellow-faced old monk suddenly became angry. "Sinful disciple, what's the meaning of all these excuses? Are you looking down on Buddha?" This accusation was so serious that Jiang Wang ignored the words "sinful disciple" and hurriedly explained, "The path of cultivation is endless. Before reaching a dead end, who knows who's right and who's wrong? Buddhism is also a prominent sect. How could I dare to look down on it?" Kuju said darkly, "So you're looking down on my Xiankong temple?" What a guy. It turned out to be a monk from the eastern holy land of Buddhism, Xiankong Temple. Jiang Wang had only heard of this famous sect in the eastern region, but had never had any dealings with it. But why would the Xiankong Temple take a fancy to his family? He hurriedly said, "Xiankong Temple is a famous sect in the world. I have always admired it." The yellow-faced old monk's face became even more withered and yellow. "Then are you looking down on me, Kuju? Given how powerful you are, even if I were to look down on you, I wouldn't dare to say it out loud." Jiang Wang could only say helplessly, "Master, to each his own." Now that he had the great illusionary land, he could deduce cultivation techniques. Furthermore, he had the title of Noble Qi. He could obtain all the cultivation techniques and secret techniques from Qi through proper channels. He didn't want to and didn't need to find a master to take care of him, especially since he had never thought of shaving his head and becoming a monk. At the end of the day, he had never come into contact with Buddhism before. Now that he had cultivated to this point, his development was not bad and he would not lose out to others. There was no reason to suddenly choose a new path. However, the situation was not in his favor. The yellow-faced old monk stared at him and said, "Isn't that so? You want to be my disciple, and I want to be your master. True and enlightened masters have different aspirations." What nonsense was this? How could it be that everyone had different aspirations? Not to mention other things, it was hard to find a match for his ability to make up nonsense. He couldn't beat him, couldn't escape, and couldn't make things clear even if he wanted to. Jiang Wang could only become serious. "Master, how can there be a reason to forcibly take in a disciple? You are only unwilling now, but you will be willing in the future. Since you will be willing in the future, how can you forcibly take in a disciple?" "Then let's talk about it in the future, Master." Kuju had an expression that said he already knew this would happen. He smiled and said, "You see, you are not so determined about the future. What does this mean? Your determination right now is just a bluff. It's meaningless. Our fate as master and disciple should be determined by Buddha. We can't avoid it, so it is better to accept it early." Jiang Wang frowned and asked, "Buddha's cultivation requires the 6 senses to be pure, right? That is the reason. So what if I have hatred in my heart? The 4 elements are all empty." The yellow-faced old monk said, "There is no emptiness." Jiang Wang's words were very resolute. Kuju couldn't help but sigh. If revenge breeds revenge, will there ever be an end to it? Jiang Wang said indifferently, "Then I will kill them all. Even if I die, I will die." This monk wasn't very reasonable, but he really didn't want to take him as his master for no reason. It must be known that the relationship between master and disciple was very important. It wasn't something that could be decided just by saying it. Both master and disciple had responsibilities. In Buddhist terms, they were entangled in karma. Even if the other party came from a famous sect like Xiankong Temple, even if the other party had enough strength to teach him and protect him. This was his first day meeting this yellow-faced old monk. He didn't know who he was or what he was thinking. So how could he be willing to take him as his master? Jiang Wang said that he had hatred in his heart, but that was only the truth. In reality, he didn't expect to make Ku Ju give up. He was still thinking of a way to escape. But what surprised him was that, after hearing his answer, Ku Ju was silent for a long time. In the end, he only sighed. Idiot! He turned around and took a step, disappearing from where he stood. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Wang's place was empty. This monk came and left without rhyme or reason. It was really confusing. Jiang Wang pondered for a long time, trying to guess the purpose of this yellow-faced old monk. After thinking about it, he could only think of one reason. If Xiankong Temple wanted to get a share of the pie in the Yang region after the war, then the Rizhao prefectural guardian was a good choice. However, he was still fighting for the position of guardian. Gao Shaoling was backed by the Gao clan of Jinghai, and Huang Yixing was a person who had lost his country. He probably wouldn't refuse such a thick thigh like Xiankong Temple. Why did they choose him? Ku Ju left without a sound. Jiang Wang walked out of the dining hall before Dugu Xiao noticed him. He came over and looked inside. Master, where is the monk? He left. Jiang Wang casually ordered, don't tell anyone about this. A monk from Xiankong Temple appeared in Qingyang town at this time. His intentions were unclear, so he didn't want to give anyone a bad impression. Dugu Xiao didn't refuse. After leaving here, Jiang Wang went to find Xiang Qian. As the strongest fighter under his command, he hadn't had a good chat with Xiang Qian after assassinating Song Wang. He became the man of Qingyang town, the punishment of the Qi court. He had to be clear about what was good and what was bad. The sky was just right outside, and Xiang Qian was still sleeping. Although he had the sword array, his inner mansion level fighting power was enough for him to live comfortably. However, as the flying sword third master of the flying sword era, he was either drunk or sleeping all day except for the time when he fought against the plague. It was really too unambitious. Jiang Wang knocked on the door twice, and then he pushed the door open and entered. With Xiang Qian's strength, even if he was sleeping, he wouldn't have ignored the noise. He just turned over on the bed with his back facing outside. He said with dissatisfaction, disturbing my sleep in broad daylight. Jiang Wang ignored his complaints and found a place to sit. He said casually, today an old monk from Xiankong Temple came to town. He wanted to take me as his disciple. He seemed to know you and said you were a jinx. Xiang Qian's complaint stopped. Xiankong Temple? He didn't turn around, but his voice came faintly. Chapter 345. Xiankong Temple. Jiang Wang gave an affirmative answer. What's the old monk's Buddhist name? Could you? Is he very strong? Unfathomable. Then it should be true. Fang Chong turned over and sat up. The current abbot of Xiankong Temple is Master Quming. This monk is of the same generation as the abbot. The generation of the Xiankong Temple is passing action, stopping, observing the mind. Sorrow and suffering emptiness are all Dharma. Today, the generation of Kuju is in charge of Xiankong Temple. He murmured, such a powerful sect with a long history must be knowledgeable. Seeing that Fang Chong knew Xiankong Temple very well and reacted so strangely, Jiang Wang couldn't help but ask, do those things that make you feel hopeless include Xiankong Temple? Not really. Fang Chong sat at the head of the bed and lowered his head slightly. I just went there. You also want to be a monk? Jiang Wang asked Fang Chong. Why did he say also? I don't want to be a monk at all. Fang Chong didn't notice this. His voice was full of disappointment, but also unconcealable pride. My master once tested the world with his sword and took me to observe. Xiankong Temple is just one of the places. The appearance of Kuju seemed to evoke Fang Chong's memories, making the emotions that had been suppressed under the numbness in the past surge up. Testing the world with his sword. Xiankong Temple is just one of the places. The information revealed by these words was too shocking. Jiang Wang's throat was a little dry. Your master tested the Xiankong Temple with his sword. What was the result? Among all the schools in Xiankong Temple, Master Kubing of the Dragon Subduing School is the first in terms of combat power. My master defeated him. Fong Chong's lifeless dead fish eyes were shining with some kind of reverence at this time, which showed his master's position in his heart. The sword test was mainly for learning from each other, not for challenging the sect. Naturally, he wouldn't fight with Master Kuming, the abbot of Xiankong Temple. Under the abbot, Master Kubing of the Dragon Subduing School was the first in terms of combat power. If Fong Chong's master could defeat him, it was enough to prove that he was one of the 3 masters of Flying Sword in the era of Flying Sword. I don't know what Kuju is, but if my master was alive, he wouldn't dare say I'm from the school. At this point, Fong Chong suddenly stopped. He couldn't continue. Her heart was filled with complex emotions, and she was choked with emotions. Jiang Wang had no way of consoling her. He could only sigh and say, "Your Shifu's grace is outstanding. Although I haven't seen it yet, my heart yearns for it." Yes. He stepped forward and said, "I respect him as if he were a god. However, he sank into his memories. My master tested the sword all over the world to sharpen the edge of the sword, to be in his strongest state. I'm going to fight my lifelong enemy. I follow my master to battle the world. Only the gods are worthy of fighting, and only the real ones are worthy of fighting. I've never seen him defeated. Such an expert." Jiang Wang's heart surged as he listened. A Taoist master was a profound truth realm expert and had never lost a battle. That is to say, Qian Qian's master was at least an invincible existence in the profound truth realm. Fong Chong continued to narrate. Later on, Master said that the time was up. He only needed one more battle to reach the peak of transcendent. In this battle, he wants to leave it to his lifelong enemy. In that battle, Master still brought me along. That was an unforgettable battle. My master's going to fight that person. That person. Qian Qian's eyes suddenly became dispirited. That person only used one punch, and the flying sword that my master cultivated with his life was shattered. Who is that? Jiang Wang asked. He. Qian Qian suddenly clenched his fists tightly. His fingers pierced in his flesh, and blood flowed out, just like that. And his face was already covered in tears. I don't even have the courage to call out his name. Jiang Wang was speechless. An existence that he respected like a god was defeated with just one punch. This was a direct defeat of his faith. Such a destructive blow was indeed not something an ordinary person could endure. Qian Qian's cultivation was at the soaring dragon realm, but he had the battle strength to compete with an inner mansion realm expert. He was also not old. It was not an exaggeration to say that his future was limitless. Many people could not understand his despair and dejection no matter what, but it was only because they had not had the same experience. What kind of existence was a Taoist master? The king of Zhuang country, Zhuang Gaoxian, did not hesitate to sacrifice the people of an entire city in order to break through the final barrier and reach the profound truth realm. Yu country, a mutant turtle beast with the battle strength of a pseudo-profound truth realm expert, was supported by the entire country. That was the unquestionable peak of the cultivation path. And a perfected person, who was almost invincible in the same realm, had his flying sword, which he cultivated with his life, shattered with just one punch. If he witnessed all of this with his own eyes, how could he not feel despair and dejection? His master, whom he regarded as a god, had died in battle, and his fighting spirit had also been defeated. So he drank all day to escape and passed his days numbly. In our lineage, the sword is our life. If the flying sword was shattered, my master would not be able to live. Qian Qian said, "My master forced himself to take me away, and that person did not stop us. My master said that he did not care and did not care. I know how proud my master was, and that was probably the reason why he could not die in peace." Before he died, my master told me that it was not that my sword path was not strong, and it was not that my flying sword was not strong, but that he was unworthy. That person could ignore him, but he could not ignore his sword path. He wanted me to concentrate on the sword path and work hard to improve my flying sword's reputation in the future. Yes. Qin held his head in pain. I can't even catch up to my master in this lifetime. So how can I defeat that person and improve my flying sword's reputation? No matter how hard I work, it's useless. Jiang Wang was silent for a long time. After he had released his emotions, he said, "First of all, you have to know that your master was very strong, very strong. He tested his sword all over the world, and he was invincible in the enlightened master realm. He could be called a hero. When I heard that, I also admired him. However, you respect him as a god, but he is not a god. He can make mistakes and be defeated. These are all things that can happen, and they are not that inconceivable. Moreover, even a god cannot be invincible forever. I know of a god of the netherworld who planned for hundreds of years and even personally descended to the present world, but he was defeated by a small country. That small country was called Zhuang, and the king of Zhuang stepped on the body of this so-called god to reach the truth-seeking realm. Not long ago, that god's body was chopped into minced meat by Marquis Ding Yuan of the Qi, and the three armies saw it. Even gods can be defeated, and so can your master. I respect your master very much, but you may not be inferior to him, because he has already passed away, and being invincible in the enlightened master realm was his peak. But you are still alive, and you have unlimited possibilities. Let's talk about the matter of hopelessness. I want to talk to you about two people. The first person is called Wang Yiwu. Before him, the limit of the reaching heaven state was set in Tianjiao, and countless geniuses couldn't reach it. Those who had reached it with great difficulty all thought it was a perfect state. He was the only one who didn't think it was the limit from the very beginning, and because of that, he stayed in the soaring dragon state for many years and was secretly mocked by countless people. That was the limit that used to be the iron rule of the world. Wasn't it hopeless to break through it? But in the end, he redefined the limit. Regardless of their standpoints, Jiang Wang admired Wang Yiwu very much. The strong were naturally worthy of respect. As for the second person, although he was born in a very prominent family, he was congenitally deficient. Because his father died very early, he didn't get many resources, and his cultivation level was always at the bottom. That family was full of talented people, and the most dazzling genius among them had been outstanding since he was a child, and was praised as stealing the glory of his peers. He was also regarded as the indisputable heir of the family. No one had ever been able to compete with him at all. Even Wang Yiwu, who broke the limit of the reaching heaven state, admitted that he was inferior to him. But the person I told you about, who was congenitally deficient, had been eyeing the position of family leader since he was a child, and wanted to compete with that indisputable genius. Is it ridiculous? Hopeless? But he had just led the war to destroy the Yang kingdom, and opened up 3 counties for Qi, and won himself a lot of capital. And I firmly believe that he will win in the end. This person is the one you were talking about, the fatso who looks harmless to humans and animals. His name is Cheng Gongsheng. P.S. The author made up the names of the characters himself, and it has nothing to do with any temples in history. Chapter 346. The 1,000,000 primordial stones given by Qi Tingyu made Jiang Wang's pockets full. This was only enough to pay off the debt of Yi Qingyu buying the meridian unlocking pill for Jiang Anan. However, it was difficult to pay off the debt in advance from tens of thousands of miles away. No business had the ability to communicate with the world. This was something that even the world's powerful countries could not do. As strong as Qi was, Qi Dao could only barely pass through the eastern region and was secretly resisted by various parties. When Jiang Anan cultivated in Lingxiao Pavilion with a Yunzhong token, Jiang Wang said that no matter how many resources Lingxiao Pavilion invested in Jiang Anan, he would definitely repay it. He had never doubted this. Regardless of the future, As long as he could get the position of Rizhao Prefecture's town commissioner, all of this would mean nothing. Among the people of Qingyang town, Dugu Xiao was about to open her meridians. After half a year, Zhu Biqian would return to the fishing sea tower. Zhang Hai still paid with the Dao primordial stones that he had set before. Only Yu Xiangqian, with his strength, the Dao primordial stones set before was obviously far from enough. He chatted with Yu Xiangqian to discuss how to repay him. The heart-to-heart talk was an accident caused by Shinkong Temple. Fortunately, the result was not too bad. Although he did not know if Yu Xiangqian was persuaded, at least it was not a bad thing to vent his pent-up emotions. At the end of the communication, Jiang Wang directly took out 10,000 primordial stones and listed the Taoist techniques that he was good at and could teach to others for Yu Xiangqian to choose from. Yu Xiangqian did not hesitate and took the primordial stones. He also said that these Taoist techniques were too complicated and he was too lazy to learn them. Although Jiang Wang was not stingy with teaching, he had the era of flying swords, which was called the top inheritance, and his cultivation system was self-contained. He did not need them. Gods and gods are different concepts. He said that he respected his teachers as if they were gods, but you used the gods of the netherworld as an example. It's not very convincing. Jiang Wang was studying Taoist techniques in the quiet room. Jiang Yin laughed at his previous communication with Yu Xiangqian. Jiang Yin was not looking for a sense of existence, but he was proving his value. Jiang Wang knew that this was because the Dao technique he was working on now made him feel threatened. The secret A-class mid-grade Taoist technique, Jealous Flame, which he had obtained from Qi's treasury, usually required one to reach the inner mansion realm. Due to the growth of his soul power, he had barely touched the edge of it and already felt its magical effects. This was a mysterious Taoist technique that dealt with emotions and communicated with the mind. It would be of great use, especially on the battlefield where souls were clashing. Hearing Jiang Yan's words, he only said, "I don't know." Shun is also a god. Shun is the shape of lightning in the sky. In ancient times, people thought that lightning was unpredictable and powerful. Lightning put on a cloak and transformed into a human form, so she thought of it as a god. Gods represent invincible might and unfathomable ability. Jiang Yan explained, "In the beginning, the heaven and earth gate was the world of the gods. People considered soaring dragon realm cultivators as gods. This is because cultivators of this realm can fly in the sky and burrow into the earth, surpassing mortals. After the appearance of the first cultivator who opened up the inner mansion, the concept of God was extended to a higher level. For a long time, Shenlin realm cultivators were considered gods. As the saying goes, I am like a god descending. In ancient times, Shenlin realm was also called immortal realm. But later, it was proven to be false immortal, and this name was lost. Since ancient times, the concept of God has been changing. Today, the path of cultivation has been completely opened up and is different from the past. Qian Qian respected his master as a god because he felt that his master was omnipotent and invincible. He didn't respect his master as a god in a narrow sense. What is a god? What kind of existence is the white-bone god? Jiang Wang asked cooperatively, what kind of existence? Just like how humans opened up the path of cultivation and strode toward transcendent. The souls of the dead who couldn't be reincarnated wandered the various realms, waiting for death. However, among those souls who didn't want to die, there were also geniuses who cultivated with their souls and opened up the divine path. After the divine path was opened up, there were also those who didn't lose their memories. They didn't want to be reincarnated and directly cultivated the divine path. These people were often cultivators when they were alive, so their divine path grew stronger. After the divine path grew stronger, there were those who felt that they had no hope in cultivation but had the talent to cultivate the divine path, directly gave up their bodies, and cultivated the divine path. The divine path also once dominated the era. Gods in a narrow sense, other than natural gods, are mostly cultivated by ghosts. They either gather faith, intercept the death chi, or devour resentment. There are thousands of divine paths, so many of them. I don't know much about the divine path. I only know it through the white bone god. Jiang Yin said, the white bone god is an existence far beyond our reach. His strength in the netherworld must be above the peak of transcendent. But he's not omnipotent and can be defeated. So you use the failure of the white bone god as an example to tell Qian that gods can also fail. Although it makes sense, in the eyes of those who know this, it's a bit ridiculous. Jiang Wang didn't take it seriously. Qian is much more knowledgeable than me. With such an invincible Zhenren as his master and such an illustrious inheritance, his vision won't be low. I think he should know this, right? Yes. Jiang Yin sighed. Maybe it's because the fat man you mentioned later moved him. Maybe it's because he also needs a reason to convince himself. Regarding this point, Jiang Wang and Jiang Yin both thought of it. But he purposely jumped out to point out Jiang Wang's mistakes, not just to correct Jiang Wang, but to show his value. Jiang Wang pointed out that Qian should know this to tell Jiang Yin that he already knew what he was thinking and that he had received his goodwill. So he was relieved. Of course, Jiang Yin didn't say anything and began to sigh with emotion. The relationship between them was very complicated. They coexisted together, but they were also wary of each other. Jiang Wang asked again. In the netherworld, the white bone evil god has already transcended the existence of the transcendent peak. Then why did he come to the world so many times? I only know that he wants to become a god of the present world. But I don't know what his meaning is, and I don't understand the difference between a god of the present world and a god of the netherworld. But I think it's a way for him to go further. Jiang Yin said, I've heard the white bone followers mention the age of white bone many times. What does it mean? Is it like the age of Yijin and the age of flying sword? Does it have anything to do with the coming of the white bone evil god? As soon as this question was asked, Jiang Wang thought that maybe starting the age of white bone was the way to become a god of the present world. And a god of the present world was a further existence than a god of the netherworld. Of course, he didn't communicate this idea to Jiang Yin. Maybe we can only know it when this age really comes. Jiang Yin sighed. Obviously, Jiang Yin didn't want to say too much about the white bone evil god. Do you know anything about the Xiankong temple? Jiang Wang changed the topic. It was rare that Jiang Yin was willing to show off today, so he didn't mind sharing more knowledge. The Eastern Holy Land of the Buddhism sect is a very old sect. It's very strong, very strong. If you didn't have the title of nobility conferred by Qi, you might have been taken to the Xiankong temple to have your head shaved. Does the Xiankong temple have a tradition of forcibly taking in disciples? That's not it. But we'd better stay away from these powerful forces with unknown intentions before they grow up. Maybe Jiang Yin felt that he had said enough today, so he didn't want to say anything more after finishing the sentence. He closed the candle and fell silent. Only Jiang Wang was left to figure out the trick of jealousy fire by himself. He thought, when the yellow-faced old monk Ku Ju was here, Jiang Yin was very well behaved. Is it because, in front of such a strong master, he might be discovered? Chapter 347. The modern world was a place where countries and sects were established. The strong and the weak were not constant. There were countries that accommodated many sects, and there were also sects that controlled many countries. As a top sect in the East region, and even the world, the Xiankong Temple's territory was so big that it was not inferior to ordinary countries. It was just that most of the places were covered by arrays. What was shown to the world was usually only the secular parts. Just like in the Cloud Country, one could see the Lingshao Pavilion after tearing open the sky. The Real Mountain Gate of the Xiankong Temple was even harder to find. It was rare to see it. Ku Ju, who was of the same generation as the current abbot, could come and go as he pleased. He directly passed through the layers of Buddhist arrays and avoided the layers of defense. He stepped into the Xiankong Temple. The core of the Xiankong Temple was like its name. It was a Xiankong Temple. It was extremely huge. It was thousands of feet tall and dozens of miles wide. It was impossible to see the end of it from the bottom of the tower. If not for the monk's concealment, one would be able to see the temple even in the north region. Surrounding the main Xiankong temple was a forest of floating treasure temples. In the holy land of the East Buddhist sect, all kinds of treasure temples were floating in the air. It was a marvelous sight. However, this was the most shocking comparison. In the entire holy land of the East Buddhist sect, all the floating treasure temples could feel the fluctuations of arrays. The reason why they could float in the air was because of the monks' powers. Only the real Xiankong temple in the center did not have any ripples of array formation. In other words, such a huge and majestic temple could only float in the air because of its own power. What a marvelous sight! The building materials of this temple were all extremely precious Xiankong stones. When the sect was established, it was said that all the Xiankong stones in the world were used to build this temple. There was only one temple in the world. There was no other. Kuju directly passed through the main temple and did not greet anyone. He walked along the side, appearing especially sneaky. Kuju! Suddenly, a shout was heard. This shout was as loud as a bell, deafening everyone. The monks who passed by all turned a deaf ear to it. They only subconsciously quickened their pace, indicating the uneasiness in their hearts. Kuju unhappily dug his ears and looked back. "Are you shouting for spring?" The one who shouted for Kuju to stop was also an old monk. Compared to the yellow-faced Kuju, he was thinner. He was so skinny that he was just skin and bones. His entire body was like a skeleton, causing people to be intimidated at first glance. Hearing Kuju's reply, his eyes widened, instantly becoming even more frightening. How can you be so unreasonable in front of so many disciples? Such a skinny person, yet his body seemed to contain an endless amount of power. Every sound he made was like he was roaring with all his might. "You're getting more and more ridiculous, Kuju." Kuju pretended to be angry. "Don't tell me you're going to call me out in private." This skinny old monk turned out to be the head of the Dragon Subduing Institute, Kubing. He was known as the strongest among the heads of the institutes. However, in the face of Kuju, he was powerless. He couldn't have an internal strife in front of all the disciples, right? He glared fiercely to his left and right, scaring the monks on this floor to quickly disperse. Then he continued to persuade him with a loud voice. "No matter what, you're still so old. You shouldn't be so indecent all the time. You're already so old, okay? Don't come out and scare people." Kuju glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. Those who don't know would think that our Xiankong temple's days are tight. You're as skinny as a ghost. Are you starving to death? Kubing was rendered speechless by his words. He could only shout in a muffled voice, "Senior Apprentice Brother Abbott wants you to go see him." Senior Apprentice Brother Abbott's abilities are unparalleled. Does he still need you to pass on a message? Meddlesome. Kuju's face was full of dissatisfaction. At this time, the other monks had already dispersed. Kubing finally couldn't take it anymore. He roared angrily. "Then don't pretend that you can't hear Senior Apprentice Brother Abbott's thoughts. Can you always say that you're deaf and can't hear clearly when it's delivered directly to your heart? Why are you so impatient? Buddhism is a place of tranquility." Kubing stopped talking. Only the sound of grinding teeth could be heard. "Sigh." Kuju sighed again. "Your teeth are really good." "Kuju." Kubing took a few deep breaths. Then, he used a loud and clear voice to speak as gently as possible. "Perhaps we haven't sparred in many years. Why don't we try it out now?" All right. You're old and you still want to move. Aren't you afraid of accidentally twisting your bones?" Seeing that Kubing was really anxious, Kuju patted his butt and walked away. "Since Senior Apprentice Brother Abbott can't leave me, I'll go see what request he has." "Hey, why are you following me? Is the Dragon Subduing Institute that free? If you don't want to care, I'll help you." However, no matter what Kuju said, Kubing just followed him silently. If he turned, Kubing would block his way. Knowing that he couldn't avoid it, Kuju had no choice but to walk towards the abbot's meditation room. "I'm going in. I'm really going in. Can you stop following me? Senior Apprentice Brother Abbott and I have important matters to discuss." "You're just the head of the Dragon Subduing Institute. In the end, Ku Bing followed Ku Ju into the abbot's meditation room. Ku Ming was a big fat monk with a sad face. He was born with Ku Ju and Ku Bing's sturdy physique. Compared to the yellow-faced old monk Ku Ju and the sickly skinny monk Ku Bing, he looked much younger, only around 40 years old. However, his face was gloomy, as if he was constantly being wronged. Even his two white eyebrows, which could show his age, drooped listlessly. Junior apprentice brother Ku Ju, Ku Ming said worriedly, "How was your trip this time?" Senior apprentice brother, "Don't worry." Ku Ju's eyebrows instantly danced. "I've already taken in another peerless disciple. The fate that Master divined for me in the early years should be here. In the next 100 years competition, I'll definitely teach those bald donkeys of Mount Meru a lesson." A monk calling a bald donkey. What was wrong with him? Ku Ming's expression became even more worried. Even the bald-headed monk seemed to be somewhat worried. On the other hand, Ku Bing suddenly shouted from the side, "There's no need for a peerless disciple. Our Xian Kong temple's Kong and Jie generations have many talented disciples. It's just that there are very few disciples in the Jing generation. The heads are all busy and need you to take in a disciple to make up the numbers." "What make up the numbers?" Ku Ju jumped up high. "When I, Ku Ju, taken a disciple, I only taken peerless disciples. How can I just make up the numbers?" Ku Bing stared and was about to say something. Ku Ming spoke first. "Junior apprentice brother Ku Ju, the peerless disciple that you mentioned. When will you bring him in? After all, time is tight." "There's no rush, senior apprentice brother," Ku Ju said solemnly. "Although my disciple is crying and begging to be brought in, the more it's like this, the more I need to grind down his temper. You have to know that sharpening the knife won't delay the work of cutting wood. Haste makes waste. Good things come with many difficulties. The tip of a treasure sword is sharpened." "Fine," Ku Bing shouted. "You mean there isn't one yet? What do you know?" Ku Ju laughed coldly. "Summer insects can't speak of candied haws." After he finished speaking, he flicked his loose linen sleeves and left in a huff. It was okay if he was rude to him, but to act like that in front of the abbot, Ku Bing was really annoyed. "Senior apprentice brother abbot, look at this fellow. How'd he raise his temper? So rude." "Haze." Ku Ming sighed worriedly. "Ku Ju entered the sect 3 days earlier than you. Why haven't I seen you call him senior apprentice brother?" Ku Bing was stunned. Chapter 348. The position of Rizhao Commandery's town commissioner was gone. Chung Gung Sheng had been building momentum for a long time and fought for it many times. But at the last moment, someone else had stolen the fruit of his labor. The new town commissioner of Rizhao Commandery was Tian Antai. The imperial edict had been issued and could not be changed. He was about to take up the position. Chung Gung Sheng and Jiang Wang's plan was thus cut off. Chung Gung Sheng angrily came to Qingyang town and informed Jiang Wang of the news. Jiang Wang had been looking forward to it. This position was very beneficial to his power, and it did not feel good to have his hopes dashed. However, he still comforted him. "You can't stop the momentum. The heavens are flawed, and people are jealous. It's inevitable." The position of one of the 3 town commissioners of the Sun region. Huang Yixing was needed to rule. Anyone who was in charge of the division of the pie would need such a person. However, he was only given the position because Chongxian Chu Liang agreed. Although his loyalty could not be guaranteed, he could be seen as part of Chongxian Chu Liang's faction. Chongxian Chu Liang was in charge of the exchange of interests. Through the position of Red Tail Commandery's town commissioner, he had a certain degree of cooperation with the Gao clan of Jinghai. It was also a fair division of the pie. Only Chung Gung Sheng, the town commissioner of Rizhao Commandery, had the intention to run it as his own territory. No matter what, this position would not be given to Tian Antai. As a general of the Qiu Offense Army, he had personally participated in the Yang exterminating battle and made contributions on the battlefield. His intermansion realm cultivation was also suitable for this position. However, in terms of contributions, he definitely could not compare to Jiang Wang's achievement in capturing the flag, Chung Gung Sheng's achievement in killing generals, or Song Wang's 70,000 soldiers before the battle. The reason why he was able to sit on this position, one, was because he was born in the Tian clan of days with a deep foundation. Two, it was unavoidably because the emperor's heart was unfathomable. He did not want the land of Yang to become Zhongshuan, Chu Liang's private land. Thirdly, it's Yunganzuan, Cheng Gung Sheng said fiercely. If he didn't agree on behalf of the Zhongenjia, His Majesty wouldn't have bypassed Uncle's opinion and appointed Tian Ontai to the position. There were two messages in his words. One was that Yunganzuan still had the absolute advantage in Zhongenjia and could even represent Zhongenjia in important situations. The other reason was that the Qi Emperor did not wish for Chongxian Chuliang to gain too much. However, due to his meritorious service, he could not openly suppress him. This was the heart of an emperor, so it was normal. Jiang Wang frowned. Why would the Zhongenjia agree to give up Rizhao County? For a top aristocratic family like the Chongxian clan, no matter how optimistic they were about Yunganzuan, they shouldn't make a choice that would harm their family's interests. Cheng Gung Sheng's face darkened. The Tian clan gave up the rights to develop Chongji Island for 10 years in exchange. He knew that Jiang Wang did not understand the significance of Chongji Island, so he added, "This island is considered a coastal archipelago. It has rich resources and will not lose to Rizhao County. It has always been the Tian clan's private property. So that's why Chongji Island might not be better than Rizhao County in terms of resources and practical benefits. But the significance was different. From the Zhongenjia's perspective, they had already gained enough in the Yang region. Losing the position of Rizhao County's town commissioner would not affect the overall situation of the Yang region. On the other hand, Chongji Island could strengthen the Zhongenjia's power in the coastal archipelago. It was an expansion of the family's influence. To a certain extent, this was also an exchange of benefits during the biscuit segment. However, the war against Yang was the result of Cheng Gung Sheng's insistence. When the biscuit was ready to be biscuit, Yunganzuan came out to preside over it. Logically speaking, this did not make sense. However, Yunganzuan did it for the Zhongenjia's benefit, so no one could object. This was because Chongxian, Chuyang, and Cheng Gung Sheng were not able to push Qi to attack Yang region on their own. They also borrowed the power of their family. It was also because of their family support that they were able to make such a huge gamble. At the end of the day, there was no reason not to let their family reap the benefits. To the Zhongenjia, exchanging the position of Rizhao County's town commissioner for 10 years of Chongji Island was a choice that had more advantages than disadvantages. But for Zhongxian Sheng himself, it was like drawing water with a sieve. Without a doubt, Jiang Wang would stand on his side. If he could get the position of Rizhao County's town commissioner, the entire Rizhao County would become Cheng Gung Sheng's base. On the other hand, 10 years on Chongji Island would be 10 years for the entire Zhongenjia. At most, Cheng Gung Sheng would be able to get some leftovers. That Yunganzuan, whom Jiang Wang had yet to meet, was decisive in his actions. He had considered everything thoroughly. That time in the heaven's secret territory, Chongshuan's obstruction was more like a casual move. He did not even get Yunganzuan's serious promise. Wang Yiwu's participation was more like Wang Yiwu's initiative. Or rather, it was a casual response to Cheng Gung Sheng's sudden change in leadership. It was not Yunganzuan's serious plan. Obtaining a spot in the heaven's secret territory in such a short time was enough to show his ability. Only this time, Yunganzuan truly made a move. He made a move against Cheng Gung Sheng. Regardless of whether Yunganzuan had finally gathered his strength, or whether he had just found the time to do so. As soon as he made a move, he plucked the fruit of Cheng Gung Sheng's victory. It was no wonder that Cheng Gung Sheng was so upset. At least this proves one thing, Jiang Wang said in a deep voice. At least now, Yunganzuan has to treat you as an opponent. Previously, whether Cheng Gung Sheng made friends in Linzi or operated his forces, Yunganzuan's reaction was neither warm nor warm. It was as if he could not gather his energy and did not care at all. At least now, it proved that Cheng Gung Sheng was no longer an existence that could be ignored. Yes, Cheng Gung Sheng patted Jiang Wang. I rushed over to comfort you. I didn't expect you to be the one comforting me. He paused. I just wanted to tell you that we have had worse times. Of course, we deserve better times. At such a difficult time, the first thing he thought of was to comfort Jiang Wang's possible disappointment. It was enough to show their friendship. Jiang Wang smiled. Now that you're here, the door is wide open. Let alone the mood. In Chongxian, Chu Yang's residence, Ding Yuanho's plaque had just been changed. The newly appointed Rizhao County Guardian, Tianan Tai, had been standing in the courtyard for a long time. After lunch, Chongxian Chu Yang walked slowly to the courtyard and looked at Tianan Tai with his hands behind his back. Is Rizhao County Guardian here to demonstrate your power? Tianan Tai bowed respectfully. I'm here to thank you for your kindness and to ask for forgiveness. Of course, he was thanking Chu Yang for helping him. Of course, he was asking for forgiveness for stealing the Rizhao County Guardian. Tianan Tai had the support of the Tian family, was appointed by the Qi Emperor, and was not in the army. Tianan Tai did not have to do this, but he still came. I'm impressed that you're here to ask for forgiveness. Chongxian Chu Yang smiled. This is Tian Anping's idea, right? Tian Antai did not dare to admit or deny it. He only said, I'm afraid of you. Good plan, Tian Anping. If I whip you, I'll be tarnishing your reputation. If I kill you, I'll be going against the emperor's will. Chongxian Chu Yang said and narrowed his eyes. But Tian Antai, tell me, if I want to kill someone, will I care about these things? Tian Antai's back was drenched in cold sweat. He groaned in his heart. 210,000 soldiers were slaughtered just like that. If Chongxian Chu Yang decided to be ruthless, would he really care about these things? Master Ho, you're mighty. Of course, he said of course for a long time, but still could not come up with a reason. Chongxian Chu Yang waved his hand impatiently. That's enough. Go back and tell Tian Anping that I won't kill you, but he has to remember this favor. Even a fierce person like Chongxian Chu Yang had a compromise in the end. Tian Antai was relieved. He bowed and left in a hurry. Although Xiong Tu did not do anything to him, it was worse than being tortured. If possible, he did not want to come to Ding Yuan's residence ever again. However, he did not want to admit it, but he had to admit that he did not have the courage to reject his brother's request. Chapter 349. Tian Antai had taken over the position of Rizhao Prefecture's town governor. However, Jiang Wang's position in Xingyang town was officially conferred, so he could still maintain a certain degree of independence. Zhongshuan Sheng and Jiang Wang discussed the current situation for a long time. In the situation where they had lost the position of Rizhao Prefecture's town governor, they had to strengthen their control over Xingyang Prefecture's town governor in order to preserve the fruits of their victory. Huang Yixing was a minister of a fallen country. He did not have much influence in Qi. Now that he belonged to Chongxian Chu Yang's faction, he could not change sides easily. He could be considered reliable. However, nothing was absolute. Just like how Yung Gunzuin had exchanged Chongji Island for Rizhao County, he would have secretly contacted Huang Yixing. The resources he could mobilize were far greater than Zhongshuan Sheng's, and the political risk of changing sides within the Zhongshuan family was also much smaller. He had to guard against this. As for the other county in Yang region, the Redtail County governor had been exchanged with the Gao family of Jinghai, so there was no need to worry. Even if they wanted to worry, the Gao family would not be willing. Overall, the division of benefits after the war did not achieve the best result because of Yung Gunzuin's interference. However, they still gain a lot. There is no need to be too disheartened. As the two were talking, Dugu Xiao walked out of the room again. She had already taken the meridian unlocking pill that Cheng Gongsheng had brought. After opening her meridians, she had officially entered Transcendent. Her footsteps were lighter, and her breathing was longer. Jiang Wang gave her the origin restoring formation as the foundation. Master, there's another monk outside. He said he's looking for you, Dugu Xiao shouted. Jiang Wang felt a headache coming on. Is it that yellow-faced old monk again? It's a young monk this time. What old monk? Cheng Gongsheng was confused. Jiang Wang briefly told him about Ku Ju wanting to take him in as a disciple. Cheng Gung Sheng immediately narrowed his eyes. The bald donkeys from Xiankong Temple also have delusions about Yang region? His first thought was the same as Jiang Wang's after careful consideration. I don't know. Jiang Wang shook his head. It's impossible for me to be the town's supervisor of Rizhao Prefecture anymore. I don't think I'll bother you anymore. Besides, the newcomer may not be a monk from Xiankong Temple. Sit here for a while. I'll go out and take a look. After saying that, Jiang Wang got up and walked out. I'll go with you. Cheng Gungsheng also got up. His expression was not very good. Speaking of which, when Xiankong Temple wanted to recruit Jiang Wang, it was like they wanted to poach Cheng Gungsheng. After all, Jiang Wang had always been Cheng Gungsheng's follower. If both sides met, it would not look good on their faces. The reason why Jiang Wang wanted to deal with it alone was that he didn't want any unnecessary conflicts between Cheng Gungsheng and Xiankong Temple. However, Cheng Gungsheng insisted on following him to take a look, so he couldn't stop him. In the living room, there was a young monk who looked rather delicate and pretty. His monk robes were washed clean, and even his bald head was bright and clean. He looked straight ahead with a gentle smile on his face. When he saw Jiang Wang coming over, he stood up and clasped his hands together. He looked very polite. As soon as he opened his mouth, Jiang Wang was caught off guard. Little shitty, I'm here to see you. It's really a monk from Xiankong Temple. He looks like a disciple of Kuju, the old monk. Jiang Wang said, Monk, don't call me that. I'm not your shitty. Why not? The handsome monk was anxious. Master already told me. How can it be fake? What did your master tell you? Jiang Wang had a headache. It's our master, shitty. The delicate and pretty monk corrected him. Master has already decided on your Dharma name. It's called Jingshun. Your senior brother, am Jingli. Cleanse my body? Jiang Wang's eyebrows twitched. Your master must have misunderstood. I don't want to be a monk, nor do I want to be cleansed. Why not? Jingli asked curiously. Master said, a goose sent from 1,000 miles away. The gift is deep, and the feelings are deep. Senior brother Jingli, junior brother Jingshin. How great is that? There seemed to be something wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Jiang Wang was about to go crazy. It wasn't that he had a good temper. It was just that Xiankong Temple's name was intimidating, and this monk was polite the whole time. As the saying goes, don't hit a smiling person. Bah, who cares if he's a smiling person? Jiang Wang shouted. This has nothing to do with why your master named me that way. It's because I don't want to be a monk at all. Jingli shrunk his neck and blinked his eyes. He said pitifully, Shitty Jingshun, how can you shout at your senior brother? You're not my senior brother, and I'm not your junior brother. Jiang Wang retorted weakly. Suddenly, he thought of something and became spirited. That's right, Rizhao Commandery's guardian has been decided. It's Tianantai. Tell your master to go find him quickly. Isn't he anxious to take in a disciple? Go quickly. Don't delay your master's matters. Why does our master want to find Tianantai? What provost protector? Master said that fame and fortune are like smoke. Monk Jingli became serious. Junior brother, can't you see through it? I can't see through it, Jiang Wang said faintly. Jingli scratched his bald head. That's not right. Master said that junior brother is very intelligent. Cheng Gungsheng, who had been watching the show for a long time, finally couldn't hold it in and said coldly, Master said, who's your master? Amit Ba, fat benefactor, Jingli replied politely. My master's Dharma name is Ku Ju. Cheng Gungsheng muttered, you think it's not right? Is it possible? Your master is a liar and you're an idiot. Are you both turtle bastards? He said the last sentence in one breath, causing Jingli's eyes to widen. You, how can you curse people? Oh, maybe I wasn't accurate enough. Cheng Gungsheng smiled apologetically. Only your master is a turtle bastard. You're not worthy. You're a turtle bastard who hasn't been weaned. All you know is Master said. Duga Xiao, who was standing in the room, almost laughed out loud. It took him a lot of effort to hold it in. Jingli's face had already turned red. He looked at Jiang Wang and said, Shitty Jingshin, This person cursed your master and senior brother. How rude. This monk's style was different from his master's, but they were both pestering. Jiang Wang persuaded. If you don't call me shitty again, I'll tell him not to curse you and apologize to you. Jingli thought about it, and probably felt that it wouldn't work. He turned back and glared at Cheng Gengsheng for a long time before saying, "You're not allowed to curse people anymore." Cheng Gengsheng pretended to be surprised and said, "When did I curse you?" "Just now," Jingli said angrily. "You called me a turtle bastard who hasn't been weaned. Let me ask you, are all living beings equal?" Jingli was very angry, but he still replied, "Of course they are." "Then, are turtle bastards considered as living beings?" Jingli replied, "All sentient beings in the boundless universe are considered living beings. If that's the case, why do you think that I'm cursing you when I call you a turtle?" Cheng Gengsheng deliberately mimicked him and scratched his head. "Could it be that you're high and mighty and look down on sentient beings?" Chapter 350. Do I? Monk Jingli was stunned for a moment before he clasped his palms together. "Benefactor, you're right. I was too obsessed." Seeing this monk in such a daze, Zhong Xiansheng found it difficult to flare up again due to Zhong Xianzun. Just as he was about to ease his tone, suddenly, he heard Jingli say, "Since this fat benefactor is so wise, why don't you also enter my master's tutelage and become his last disciple? You can study the supreme Buddhist Dharma with us. It's better than struggling in the mortal world." He had a sincere expression. Master said, "A goose is sent from 1,000 miles away. Deep courtesy and deep affection. Why don't you call yourself Jing Chong?" "Scram!" Cheng Gengsheng roared. Monk Jingli was stunned. "You're scolding me, right? So what if I'm scolding you?" Cheng Gengsheng was already rolling up his sleeves. "If you don't leave, I'll beat you up again." Jingli lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before saying, "You can't beat me." "Huh!" Cheng Gengsheng didn't believe him. He stretched his hand forward. He couldn't really kill this monk because of a small spat. Therefore, he didn't use any heavy techniques. He only wanted to scare him. However, the monk's silhouette was already nowhere to be seen. Only a voice was left. "I have to set a good example in front of Junior Brother. I won't fight you today." There was a moment of silence in the living room. This young monk with an ordinary appearance and restrained aura had come and gone without a trace. It was truly shocking. Jiang Wang exclaimed, "You might not be able to beat him." F***CK. Zhong Xiansheng couldn't help but curse. "Even this idiot has such a high cultivation. Could it be that we are even inferior to this idiot?" The two of them looked at each other and blushed with shame. Disregarding his true combat strength, Jing Li's cultivation was undoubtedly higher than the two of them. At this moment, Jing Li's voice sounded in Jiang Wang's ears again. "Junior Brother, I'll visit you another day." Jiang Wang couldn't help raising his eyebrows. "What's wrong?" Cheng Gengsheng asked warily. "That monk is whispering to me." Jiang Wang stifled a laugh. Cheng Gengsheng suddenly got into position. "Is that monk still here?" He had just scolded that monk, and his cultivation was so high. If they really fought, it would be troublesome. "You should have left," Jiang Wang said with a smile. It was rare to see this fatty nervous. It was quite interesting. "Forget it. Now that this matter is over, there's nothing to stay here for. I'm going back to Linzi. We'll contact each other again." During this period of time, Cheng Gengsheng had been in 100 Rivers City, busy with the position of Sunshine Town Commissioner. That was why he could travel to and from Qingyang Town so quickly. Now that the matter was settled, he had to rush to deal with the matter at Linzi. As for the connection he spoke of, it was naturally within the great illusionary realm. Jiang Wang had no objections. It was foreseeable that dealing with his relationship with Huang Yixing and Tian Antai would be one of his priorities in the Yangland. But plans were often not as good as changes. At this moment, Cheng Gengsheng's guard outside the courtyard suddenly rushed in and handed over a letter without even bowing. A letter from Linzi, urgent. Jiang Wang knew that this was Cheng Gengsheng's shadow guard that had gradually formed. Such an urgent matter must be important. Cheng Gengsheng didn't exchange pleasantries and directly opened the letter. After reading 10 lines at a glance, his face immediately darkened. "What's wrong?" Jiang Wang asked. The matter was confidential. Cheng Gung Sheng handed over the letter while glancing at Dugu Xiao. Dugu Xiao didn't wait for the order and said, "Master, I'll go take care of the town hall's affairs first." Jiang Wang nodded and let her go. It was a very simple principle to not keep it a secret. It wasn't that he didn't trust Dugu Xiao. After Dugu Xiao left, only Cheng Gung Sheng, Jiang Wang, and the shadow guard were left in the room. At this moment, Cheng Gung Sheng flew into a rage. "Bastard, you bullied me." Jiang Wang had already read the letter and understood why he was so angry. The contents of the letter were all related to the Jubao merchants. It listed a few of the Jubao merchants' recent business activities and various partners. But tracing back to the source, the same person was behind all of them, Yung Gunzuin. In other words, the Jubao merchants and Yung Gunzuin had reached an agreement. What kind of existence was the Jubao merchants? They were the most powerful merchant in the current Qi land. More importantly, not long ago, Cheng Gung Sheng and the Jubao merchants worked together and dealt a huge blow to the Jubao merchants' rival, the Four Seas Merchant Alliance. Both sides worked closely together, at least before and during the Yang-destroying war. After the war, it was the time to wantonly invade the market and squeeze the Four Seas Commerce Alliance's living space. Zhong Xiansheng had formulated many cooperation plans for this. This was one of his fundamental interests. It could also be said that this was one of his biggest gains from the Yang-destroying war. The Yang-destroying war had dealt a huge blow to the Four Seas Merchant Alliance's reputation and fundamental interests. The Jubao merchants had placed their bets on Chongxian and Chu Liang and won big. But now, they had turned around to work with Yung Gunzuin. This was an undisguised betrayal, and also a blow that hurt the tendons and bones. Yung Gunzuin had never made a move before, but once he made a move, it would be a bloodbath. He slapped Cheng Gung Sheng, who was feeling smug after the Yang-destroying war, awake. Exchanging Chongji Island for Rizhao Prefecture's town ambassador and destroying Zhong Xuanqing's fundamental interests in Rizhao Prefecture was only the first step. Before they could make up for their losses, their lair had been destroyed in the blink of an eye. His close and important allies had already switched sides. What happened next? What else would he do? What would he do next? No. Cheng Gung Sheng showed a rare hint of impatience. "I have to return to Linzi immediately." "Calm down. No matter how bad it is, we are much stronger than before." Jiang Wang said, "I'll go with you." 14th Prince was still recovering from his injuries. This was one of the rare times that 14th Prince was not by Cheng Gung Sheng's side since Jiang Wang met him. Cheng Gung Sheng calmed down. "What about here?" Qingyang Town was also important. The fruits of victory in the Yang-destroying war could not be given away so easily. "Don't worry," Jiang Wang said. "Leave Qingyang Town to Xiang Qian and Dugu Xiao. They can handle it." He patted Cheng Gung Sheng. "Go outside and wait for me. I'll give them some instructions, and they'll come right away." Cheng Gung Sheng did not hesitate. He really needed support now. Jiang Wang quickly found Dugu Xiao and Xiang Qian. He thought for a moment and called Zhu Biqiong along. "I have to go to Linzi. I'll leave Qingyang Town to you. Dugu Xiao will handle the daily affairs, and Xiang Qian will make decisions on important matters. Fellow Taoist Zhu, you come from a large sect and are knowledgeable. You'll be in charge of finding and filling in the gaps." Jiang Wang appeared to be in a hurry, but the three of them didn't cause any trouble and agreed readily. They arranged the general plan for Qingyang Town. The main thing was to keep a low profile and maintain a good relationship with Tianantai. At the same time, they paid attention to Huang Yixing's movements. After thinking for a moment, Jiang Wang said to Zhu Biqiong, "If Linzi is busy, I'm afraid I won't be able to come back in time to see you off. When the half-year deadline is up, fellow Taoist Zhu can return to the sea fishing tower." Zhu Biqiong rolled her eyes. "Got it." At this moment, Xiang Qian suddenly asked faintly, "It seems that the story you told me is not complete. Has the main character in the story reached the point of despair again?" Only the two of them could understand this. As soon as Zhong Xianzun made his move, the situation changed drastically. It wasn't wrong to say that Zhong Xiansheng was in a dangerous situation. Jiang Wang was silent for a moment and then asked, "Do you think he'll give up? We might as well wait and see in Qingyang town." With that, he turned and left. At that moment, Xiang Qian seemed to see a long sword being unsheathed. Chapter 351. The Yang Kingdom was destroyed in one battle, and the Yang region was absorbed into the Qi territory. Dingyao and Pingxi commanderies lost most of their significance as border commanderies. The Qiu offense army was the absolute elite of the Qi and one of the 9 soldiers. They couldn't stay in the Yang region for long. They had returned to prevent the other countries bordering the Yang region from panicking. The border troops of Dingyao and Pingxi commanderies moved to the Yang region. Most of the Yang Kingdom's capable soldiers were slaughtered, and there wouldn't be any resistance for the next 10 years. This was why the Qi could appoint old officials like Huang Yixing without worry. If the Yang region still couldn't submit after 10 years, then there was no need for these town envoys to exist. 10 miles away from Qingyang town, 2 people rode on the official road. Even though Jiang Wang and Zhong Xiansheng were already at the Soaring Dragon realm and were capable of flying in the sky, it was still safer to ride a horse that had the bloodline of a demon beast in it. They didn't know what they would encounter on this trip to Linzi. Yung Genzuan wasn't an opponent they could underestimate. They needed to maintain their peak combat power at all times to deal with any possibilities. Demonic beasts were rare, and a mature demonic beast was equivalent to a meridian unlocking pill. Therefore, horses with mixed demonic beast blood were very expensive. Now that Cheng Gengsheng's reputation was different, he could use 2 horses in the Yang region. The steed, which was equivalent to a demonic beast, was even more priceless than the meridian unlocking pill. As the 2 rode past, a shiny bald head popped out from the forest beside the road. It was Monk Jingli. He scratched his head awkwardly. Master said that monks should be merciful and not argue with people face to face. If you're angered, you should be beaten. But this fatty coaxed junior brother Jingshun to come with him. I can't take revenge. He hung his head dejectedly and put away the tattered sack in his hand. On the other hand, Jiang Wang and Cheng Gengsheng rode side by side without stopping. They passed through the prefectures and rushed to Linzi in the shortest time possible. As the capital of Qi, Linzi was undoubtedly the most majestic city in the eastern region. Disregarding the capital region, just Linzi city itself had a circumference of 320 li. What kind of concept was that? One must know that the entire Zhuang country was only 3,000 miles in size. Of course, as the country's strength increased, its territory had also expanded. However, it still hadn't exceeded 4,000 miles in size. Meanwhile, Linzi alone was already more than a tenth of the Zhuang country of the past. There was a saying in the eastern region, "You don't know how high the city is until you reach it. You won't know how insignificant you are until you reach the city walls." He was talking about Linzi. Since it was said to be near the Zi River, naturally, it was impossible to jump over the Zi River. The meaning of Linzi was east of Linzi River. The Zi River was probably the only river in the modern world that had nothing to do with the Long River system. Previously, it was mentioned that the Long River was the boundless sea in the land. It was also the mother river, the ancestral river, and the source of the inland river. Most of the great rivers and lakes in the world were inextricably linked to the Long River. The Zi River was isolated outside of the river system, majestic as it flowed east into the sea. Let's not talk about Zihe first. With the size of Linzi, there were a total of 108 city gates. Many people who lived in the city might not know where these city gates opened. Cheng Gengsheng brought Jiang Wang into the city through the Xian Gate. Linzi's 108 city gates had benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faith, technique, influence, and discipline, and gathering and passing. It showed the all-inclusive nature of Changqi. Standing under Linzi city, one couldn't help but have doubts. Was such a majestic city really built by human strength? Standing under the city, one couldn't see the end of it. Actually, when this huge city appeared in one's line of sight, one could only see a cross-section. Unless an extraordinaire flew far away and exhausted their eyesight, it would be very difficult to see the whole picture. The greenish-black stone slabs of the city gave Jiang Wang a feeling that they were indestructible. The fine formation patterns engraved on each stone slabs were even more shocking. Even if the state of Qi were to be completely defeated one day, anyone who had seen Linzi with their own eyes would find it hard to believe that anyone could take down this majestic city. Apart from the elders of the Jiang imperial family, there were very few people who could clearly describe the layout of the entire Linzi city. Needless to say, Cheng Gengsheng's identity and Jiang Wang also had a noble title. They only needed to leave their horses outside the city, so it wasn't difficult for them to enter. The moment they entered Linzi city, it was like they had bumped into a sea of people. There were people everywhere, densely packed. There was a phrase called rubbing shoulders. Only when they arrived at Linzi did they know that this phrase was very apartment. Jiang Wang traveled east for tens of thousands of miles, passing through many countries and sects, but he had never seen such a bustling place. If not for the fact that he and Cheng Gengsheng's cultivation were good, they might have lost each other. What was called vast sea of people? The moment he entered the sea of people, Jiang Wang's sword intent jumped around. Heaven, earth, and man, 3 swords. The third sword was the vast sea of people. Without seeing such people, how could it be considered perfect? Cultivation really required experience. Jiang Wang carefully comprehended as he followed Cheng Gengsheng forward. On the way to Linzi, it didn't rest at all. Cheng Gengsheng's impatience could be seen. However, when they arrived at Linzi city, he didn't immediately go to the Jubao merchants. Instead, he first brought Jiang Wang to a luxurious inn. The more impatient you are, the more you can't let the opponent see that you are impatient. Cheng Gengsheng said to Jiang Wang. This inn wasn't his own residence in Linzi, nor was it his property in Linzi. He had people booking in Linzi in advance to cover up the news. Of course, it couldn't be completely covered up, but it was still a moment. The two changed into decent clothes, washed off the dust from the journey, and specially ate some food and wine. Only then did Cheng Gengsheng decide to go out. The merchants were different from the other sections. What they needed was a lively atmosphere. The headquarters of the Jubao merchants was located in the most prosperous area in the west of the city, right at the intersection. Many people in Linzi would be familiar with this cornucopia-like building complex. However, it wasn't so easy to enter this cornucopia. Of course, there was no reason for Cheng Gengsheng to be stopped outside the cornucopia, even if the cooperation between the two sides had already broken down and they might even become enemies. The person who personally came to receive them was the Jubao merchants' vice president, Cheng Shi. In the entire Jubao merchants, there were only 2 vice presidents below the president. This reception couldn't be said to not be grand. However, to Cheng Gengsheng, this fatty wore a low-key green gown. Of course, the white silk woven into the gown secretly showed off a noble aura. Moreover, he was boldly squeezed into the seat, not at all low-key. He was sitting in the guest seat, but he seemed to be the owner of this place. The middle-aged woman opposite him was about to sit down. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "President Su, why are you embarrassed to meet an old friend?" The wrinkles at the corners of Cheng Shi's eyes were hard to hide, but they didn't lose their charm. To be able to sit as the vice president of the Jubao merchants, she naturally wouldn't be easily suppressed by Cheng Gengsheng. Hearing this, she glanced at Jiang Wang. Young Master Chongxian has known the hero who killed General Ji Cheng for a long time, but this is the first time I've seen this handsome young man. You must be the young hero who took the Ji clan's battle flag? Jiang Wang was wearing a frost-colored martial robe today. The material was also of the highest quality. His medium-long hair was simply tied up, looking neat and clean. Clothes make the man. After tidying up, he indeed looked more heroic. At this moment, he was silently sitting to the side. His confidence was hidden between his brows, but he wasn't ostentatious. Hearing Cheng Shi's words, he only smiled lightly. as if he didn't hear anything. Even if it was rare for someone to praise him for being handsome, even if the person who praised him was still so charming, one must know that the word handsome had never been used on him before. In the end, Chung Gungsheng was still the most suitable. When he invited Lien Ke to accompany him, he would probably be even more handsome. His meaning was very clear. No matter who you are, no matter how beautiful you are, answer Chung Gungsheng's question first, then I'll talk to you. Chapter 352. Jiang Wang's silence surprised Cheng Shi. In her eyes, Jiang Wang was a young hero who had just been conferred a title. No matter how much he respected Chung Gungsheng, he shouldn't be willing to hide his talent. The deputy association head of the Jubao merchants was talking to him. No matter how much he disliked it, he shouldn't ignore it. His actions were more like that of a simple servant. This actually showed that he wouldn't change his attitude. Thoughts flashed in her mind, but she didn't show any embarrassment on her face. She only smiled and looked at Chung Gungsheng. Association head is busy every day. The Chamber of Commerce is expanding into the Yangland, so we can't do without you. Only I, as the deputy association head, am free. Otherwise, I can't neglect you. This woman's heart was as small as the tip of a needle. Chung Gungsheng and Jiang Wang's attitudes weren't good, so she didn't say anything nice. In her words, there were only 3 words. You're not worthy. The association head of the Jubao merchants was surnamed Su and named Shi. He was a first-class person in Linzi City. In the past, when Chung Gungsheng wanted to meet him, he had to be brought by Chongxian and Chu Liang. Although he had the merit of planning the Yangland and killing generals, he still might not be able to do it. Expanding into the Yangland. These 4 words were even more painful. How did the Jubao merchants win the 4 Seas Merchant Alliance in the Yangland? Wasn't it because of Chung Gungsheng? However, he turned around and left him to flirt with Yung Ginzuan. Chung Gungsheng smiled. I want to meet Association Head Su, because there are some words that only he can understand. Young Master Chongxian is joking. Cheng Shi smiled. Don't I also have a pair of ears? Since Su Shi didn't appear, the meaning of this trip was halved. Chung Gungsheng, of course, wouldn't be so childish as to leave in a huff. He asked, can you represent President Su Shi? Cheng Shi was still smiling calmly. Although I have the word vice in my name, I am still the society leader. Chung Gungsheng nodded and turned to ask Jiang Wang. Brother, which gate did we enter this time? In a clear voice, Jiang Wang said, but I can see the word trust. Cheng Shi's smile did not change. Faith is indeed close. The Xian gate was indeed not far from the Jubao merchants. Chung Gungsheng secretly mocked her for breaking her promise, but she mocked Chung Gungsheng for losing his sense of propriety. Burning with anxiety, she refused to yield even a little bit. It's said that there's a first-come, first-served rule in business. Chung Gungsheng said coldly, why is it that I haven't even left the revered gate, and you are already welcoming Yunganzuan? Isn't this gate a little too loose? Cheng Shi lifted the teacup and gently lifted the lid. Young Master knows that the 4 Seas Business Alliance is a business. Since it's a business, how can we close the door and refuse customers? I'll let President Chung know. Zhongshuan Sheng seemed as if he didn't understand the hint of wanting him to leave, and he only said, what kind of foundation does the 4 Seas Commerce Alliance have? How enormous is it? It's all because they've lost their credibility that they've fallen to such a state in the Yangland. Doing business is all about peace and prosperity. It's not my place to talk about the good and bad of others. However, Yinjian is not far away, so it's a good warning. But then again, as he said that, Cheng Shi actually yawned, not bothering to hide his disdain. What do you mean by losing our reputation? How is that appropriate? It's not like we're doing business with others. Young Master Sheng, aren't you and Young Master Zun family? These words made one angry. Even Jiang Wang, who was at the side, was furious. Chung Gungsheng laughed out loud. Great. Only now do I know what it means to do business. Deputy President Chung said lazily, Young Master is too kind. Chung Gungsheng stood up, his smile suddenly retracting as he pointed at Cheng Shi. I'll let you all remember that the Jubao merchants were destroyed by a short-sighted woman like you. Out of respect for the Jungenjia, I'll call you young master." Changshi still sat there without moving, but his eyes turned cold. "Although I'm just an ordinary person with no power, I still have to advise you to speak nicely." The atmosphere froze, and there was no room for negotiation. Or rather, this was the outcome that Changshi wanted. Although the Jungenjia was strong, the Jubao merchants weren't weak either. Furthermore, with Yung Gunzu in there, Changgung Sheng couldn't represent the Jungenjia. This was one of the reasons why the Jubao merchants chose Yung Gunzuin over Changgung Sheng. Changgung Sheng relied on his family's power to lead the Yang-destroying war with his uncle, Chong Xianshuyang. The family naturally had the right to enjoy the fruits of victory after the war. As long as it was beneficial to the family, Changgung Sheng had no reason to refuse, and he didn't have the right to refuse. His core interest was actually in Rizhao Prefecture. This was because the other two prefectures had been given out. Before the war, the Jungenjia's business in Yangland had been given to Changgung Sheng. However, this piece of meat was still small at that time, and it wasn't very attractive. Now that the Yang-destroying war had taken place, as the leader of the war, the Jungenjia's business in Yangland had the potential to expand to the limit. This was why Yung Gunzuin targeted the Jubao merchants. He wanted to use the Jubao merchants as a fulcrum to leverage Changgung Sheng's core interest. He didn't use the Jungenjia's internal power. There was no internal strife. It was purely a competition between him and Changgung Sheng. Hence, it was logical. This was also why Changgung Sheng was so anxious that he immediately rushed back to Linzi to deal with it. There was a fire in his backyard, and he had to save it. This was much more serious than losing the position of Rizhao Prefecture's town commissioner. Now that they were in the Jubao merchants' territory, they would only be at a disadvantage if things got out of hand. However, they couldn't show weakness. The more difficult it was, the more Changgung Sheng couldn't let others see that he was weak. Thinking of this, Jiang Wang stood up and put his hand on Changgung Sheng's shoulder. He said to Changshi, "Today's visit to Cornucopia is indeed not as good as meeting you in person. My horizons have been broadened. I am deeply moved by the Supreme Residence's friendship. Within 2 years, I will knock on the door of the inner residence and pay you a visit to repay today's kindness." These were ruthless words. At the same time, he distanced the battle line so that the conflict wouldn't happen right in front of them. The Jubao merchants still had a vice president come out personally to receive them. It could be seen that although they were leaning towards Yung Gunzuin, they didn't want to completely fall out with Changgung Sheng. After all, from the Tianfu secret territory to the destruction of the Yang kingdom, Changgung Sheng had proven his potential step by step. Only this Changshi, who had received a lot of benefits from Yung Gunzuin, didn't give in at all. Of course, whether she gave in or not was only a minor detail. The general truth was already like this. I know that the man from Qingyang town defeated the young hero of the Tianfu secret territory, but if you want to make trouble for the Jubao merchants, I'm afraid the inner residence won't be enough. Chengshi looked at Jiang Wang and smiled. I see that you have a good temperament. I'll give you 10 more years. Maybe you can set up a holy tower. How about you come back then? This woman was really sharp-tongued. It was difficult to gain the upper hand. In terms of bickering, Changgung Sheng might not necessarily lose to her, but it was inconvenient for him to scold her. Fortunately, Jiang Wang didn't want to show off. Hearing this, he only said, "Then I'll have to trouble you to wait. The inner residence is enough." After that, he pulled Changgung Sheng. Changgung Sheng also looked at him coldly, then left with Jiang Wang. Behind them, Chengshi only said, "I won't see you out." Chapter 353. The two of them sat facing each other as the carriage traveled along the road. The curtain of the carriage was gently lowered, cutting off the clamor of the street. The carvings on the carriage were enough to prevent prying eyes. "What do you plan to do?" Jiang Wang asked. Since they had already entered the Jubao merchants, they could no longer hide their whereabouts from Yung Gunzuin. If they wanted to do something, they had to hurry. because once Zhong Xianzun's follow-up actions began, it was very likely that they would be overwhelmed and exhausted. He did not ask what to do, because people like Cheng Gongsheng would never be at a loss. To the Jubao merchants, they have already gained the upper hand in the competition with the Four Seas Commerce Alliance. It is time for them to expand their advantage. Indeed, the Zhongshuan family was involved in the operations of the Yang Kingdom. As for whether it is me or Yung Gunzuin who makes the decisions in Zhonggenjia, there is no difference. The reason why they chose Yung Gunzuin is because they think that Yung Gunzuin could be of greater help to them at this time. Cheng Gongsheng said fiercely, I want them to know that they are wrong. Completely wrong. It was difficult to prove that the Jubao merchants were wrong, because they were actually right. Putting aside the battle in Yang country, Yung Gunzuin could indeed be of greater help to the Jubao merchants in all aspects. Whether it was his own personal connections or the right to speak in the family, he had a considerable advantage over Cheng Gongsheng. The Jubao merchants were not blind or stupid. They were a group of extremely intelligent businessmen. In business, they only cared about profits. They took out resources to cooperate with Cheng Gongsheng because they needed to defeat the Four Seas Commerce Alliance. Coincidentally, there was a huge opportunity in Yang country. Now that they had decided to cooperate with Yung Gunzuin, it was because they saw a brighter future. However, since Cheng Gongsheng said so, he naturally had his own thoughts. Therefore, Jiang Wang only asked, What do you need me to do? If I remember correctly, you have a good relationship with Green Cliff Academy's Su Xianqian? Cheng Gongsheng asked. Jiang Wang pondered for a moment. We're kindred spirits. However, we haven't interacted much with each other, so I don't see him being willing to help us. He had to make their relationship clear, lest Cheng Gongsheng have any unrealistic expectations, which would affect his overall plan. As long as we're like-minded, I don't need your help. Cheng Gongsheng tapped his thigh. It was not a special carriage, so he felt very restrained sitting in it. But at this time, he could not be more particular. You only need to arrange a meeting with Li Longchuan through him. Meet Li Longchuan. Jiang Wang was puzzled. That time outside the Heaven's secret territory, I could tell that he didn't want to get involved in the dispute between you and Yung Gunzuin. I also don't need his help. I just want to give him a gift. Cheng Gongsheng said, a gift that he can't refuse. Jiang Wang raised an eyebrow. The bow of Mao Mountain? Do you think he can refuse? Cheng Gongsheng asked. After killing Ji Cheng, the bow of Mound Mountain, which had been passed down in the Ji clan of Sky Hero, became Cheng Gongsheng's spoils of war. This famous bow could be considered a precious treasure, especially for those who were skilled in archery. It was superior to all other godly weapons. Cheng Gongsheng was indeed generous when he gave a gift. Jiang Wang thought for a moment. No archer would refuse the bow of Mound Mountain, but if we give him such a precious gift, he might hesitate. Cheng Gongsheng said, that's how we should give it. What hasn't the Li clan of Stonegate seen before? What doesn't he have? If we give him too little, he won't even look at it. As he spoke, he took out a storage box and handed it over. There's only one bow of Mound Mountain in this storage box. I'll have to trouble you to send me off. This matter wasn't troublesome. Su Xianqian was still in Linzi. Blue Cliff Academy had a side courtyard in Linzi. Earlier, Su Xianqian had invited Jiang Wang, but because of a series of incidents, they didn't make the trip. Jiang Wang took the storage box and asked, just a gift. Just a gift. You don't have to say or do anything else. Jiang Wang nodded, indicating that he understood. I'll go now. Is there anything else I need to pay attention to? Cheng Gongsheng was silent for a moment, then raised his eyes to look at him. Brother, I'll have to drag you into gambling with me again. Jiang Wang only smiled. You always have good gambling luck. He stood up, lifted the curtain, and left. Looking at the curtains, Cheng Gongsheng muttered, You didn't ask how big this game was, or what we were betting on. Different from the main courtyard, Blue Cliff Academy was just an ordinary academy. They only taught reading, not cultivation. This was because anyone who established a sect or taught cultivation in the Qi department had to be controlled by the Qi department. They had a certain amount of responsibility and obligation, and they couldn't reject wartime enlistments. Blue Cliff Academy was one of the 4 great academies in the world. It was one of the top academies in the Confucian faction and didn't want to be controlled. Because of these reasons, this academy didn't allow anyone to teach cultivation. Of course, because Blue Cliff Academy didn't have a national stance, there were disciples from all over the world. The Chi department didn't treat them too harshly and block their own talents. Apart from not allowing anyone to teach cultivation, the Blue Cliff Academy was still very polite in other aspects. In this courtyard, there were especially intelligent and outstanding scholars. They could also be selected to cultivate in this courtyard and walk on the path of transcendence. In general, it wasn't much different from a normal private academy. After Su Xiangqian traveled to the Chi department, he took the position of a teacher at Blue Cliff Academy. After winning the divine ability seed of the Tianfu secret realm, he spent all day in Linzi. When Jiang Wang found the academy, he was still not there. If the academy head didn't calculate the time and say that he would be back soon, Jiang Wang was going to go out and look for him. After waiting for less than the time it took for 2 incense sticks to burn, Su Xiangqian returned with a ruddy complexion, his robes fluttering in the wind. "Today, I've just returned from collecting literature." "Hey!" He looked around the courtyard, and his strangely large forehead leaned forward. "Isn't this Brother Jiang? What brought you here?" Jiang Wang looked at him and asked, "Which wind did you pick?" Su Xiangqian chuckled and lowered his voice. "The warm jade pavilion." However, it wasn't because he was embarrassed. He glanced outside. Don't let that old scholar hear. The name Warm Jade Pavilion was enough to know what kind of place the Warm Jade Pavilion was. With Su Xiangqian's identity as a core disciple of Blue Cliff Academy and the student of Ru Emoya, no matter how old scholar the academy head was, he couldn't control him. From this point alone, it could be seen that although he didn't look proper, he respected his teachers. Jiang Wang smiled and said, "I'm ashamed to say that I haven't seen you in a long time since we parted in the Tianfu secret realm. I've come to find Brother Su today because I have something to ask of you." Su Xiangqian first lifted his long robe and sat across from him. Then he said seriously, "Brother Jiang, there's no harm in saying it. Being coy and beating around the bush wasn't the way to make friends." Jiang Wang didn't hide the fact that he had come because he had a request. He said directly, "Brother Su, please be the middleman and arrange a meeting with Li Longchuan of the Sherman Li family." "That's nothing." Su Xiangqian agreed immediately. "There's only one thing," he said seriously. "I'm only responsible for letting you meet, not for anything else. No matter what you want to meet him for, I won't express my opinion. Brother Longchuan is on good terms with me, so I can't make things difficult for him." This was a true gentleman. He wasn't coy, pretentious, and sincere. Jiang Wang nodded. "That's reasonable." Chapter 354. The brothels of Linzi were known as the 4 famous brothels. The famous fragrant brothel also had a branch in Linzi. However, it was not even in the 4 famous brothels and could only be considered a second-rate brothel. Su Xiangqian arranged to meet Li Longchuan for Jiang Wang at the House of Red Sleeves, one of the 4 famous brothels. The expenses here were calculated using Dao origin stones. In other words, those who could enter these places were mostly transcendent stage cultivators. Following Su Xiangqian, who was familiar with the place, Jiang Wang painfully noted down the expenses. He would have to report them to Cheng Gengsheng later. Now that he was in charge of a town, there were many places where he needed to spend money. He could not lose out. The 2 of them sat down in the private room, and a graceful maid came to serve tea. It was the best tea. The tea mist lingered in the air, outlining a woman holding a pipa. This tea was called the mistress pipa. Before it entered the mouth, one could already feel the saliva in their mouth. The tea's fragrance seeped into one's body. Su Xiangqian took out a name card and handed it to a maid. "Go to the city destroying marquee residence and invite young Master Li Longchuan. Tell him I am waiting for him." The maidservant bowed and left. Su Xiangqian then instructed the remaining maidservant, "Go and invite a skilled player over. When drinking this tea, you must listen to a pipa song." Jiang Wang was amazed. This Confucian scholar with a high forehead could also roll about in the streets and alleys, and could also play with all kinds of refined interests. Thus, he praised, Brother Su also knows how to enjoy life. Su Xiangqian laughed mischievously, instantly destroying the atmosphere. I heard that the Li family's matriarch is in Linzi recently. If someone from the House of Red Sleeves comes at this time, you'll have a good time. Jiang Wang was stunned. He thought that the reason he asked the House of Red Sleeves to invite Li Longchuan was to keep his secret. He did not expect it to be such a bad taste. It was really Su Xiangqian style. Not long later, the sound of a pipa was suddenly heard. Su Xiangqian picked up the cup of Mistress Pipa in front of him and made an inviting gesture to Jiang Wang. Jiang Wang did not understand these things, so he did as he was told. With the lid of the teacup, the mistress holding the pipa was completely submerged in the tea. He took a light sip, and the taste of the tea lingered in his mouth for several rounds. He felt that it was wonderful, but he couldn't taste the true flavor of the tea. It made people want to explore it anxiously, and their senses only gather between their lips and teeth. Suddenly, the taste of the tea rolled down his throat. Clang, clang. He couldn't tell whether it was the sound of a pipa in his throat or the sound of a pipa in his ears. Or perhaps they would make a sound, but the internal and external harmonize. It made one's eyes and ears relaxed, and one's heart and mind delighted. Jiang Wang had never experienced such a feeling when drinking tea in his life. He wanted to blur out a word of praise for the good tea, but he felt that if he said it now, it would be too abrupt and spoil the rhythm. He just wanted to relax his mind and feel at ease. The sounds of tea and pipa were like pearls and jade, gradually coming one after another. Both the sound and the fragrance wafted out. Unknowingly, the song of the pipa came to an end, and the cup of Mistress Pipa was also finished. Only then did Su Xiangqian sigh. The 8-tone tea Red Sleeves has 3 unique techniques. I love this misty pipa the most. This is really good tea. Jiang Wang felt that he was at a loss for words, and could only sigh in admiration. The two of them chatted for a while. Su Xiangqian had traveled the world, and Jiang Wang had traveled tens of thousands of miles, so there was no lack of topics to talk about. They couldn't help but talk about the country blessed by heaven, the giant tortoise beast, the talented Yin Guan, and the now famous no door to hell. They could only sigh to each other. If this person was born in a country like Jing, Qin, or Qi, he would definitely be dazzling and wouldn't have such a bumpy life. A peerless genius who walked on the edge of a knife always made people sigh. Just as they were talking, a voice suddenly came from outside the door. "Where is old Gao? It's rare to see you spend money, so I came without stopping." This voice was full of heroic spirit. Naturally, Li Longchuan had arrived. However, Jiang Wang couldn't figure out why he called Su Xiangqian old Gao. Following the voice, the extraordinarily handsome Li Longchuan, with a jade belt around his forehead, stepped into the room with a big laugh. Su Xiangqian said with a dark face, "Don't call me that. Even if you take off this jade belt, your forehead might not be lower than mine. So it's this old Gao." Jiang Wang almost laughed out loud, but he suppressed it and greeted Li Longchuan. "Brotherly, long time no see." Seeing that Jiang Wang was also there, Li Longchuan smiled and said, "I've heard a lot about the man of Qingyang town when I was in Linzi." Because of Su Xiangqian, they had gotten along well in the land of Heaven Mystery Land. Although Li Longchuan came from an extraordinary family, he wasn't arrogant. At that time, Jiang Wang was a first-class reaching heaven state strong man who had gone to fight for the seed of a supernatural power. Now, he was a reserved supernatural power and had proven his strength many times on the battlefield of the Yang Kingdom. He had also won the flag. Li Longchuan wouldn't underestimate him. An 18-year-old hereditary peer baron title was enough for him to enter the aristocratic circle of Qi. Cheng Gengsheng had asked Jiang Wang to deliver the gift on his behalf because Jiang Wang was now quite influential. Jiang Wang's appearance made the gift seem especially grand. "Don't embarrass me. It's the soldiers who put their lives on the line. I'm just greedy for the credit." While the two of them were still exchanging pleasantries, Su Xiangqian called out, "Come, come, come, please sit." Yung Genzuan had officially attacked Cheng Gongsheng. This news had spread like wildfire in the aristocratic circle of Linzi. As the son of a top aristocratic family, Li Longchuan naturally knew about it. In fact, when he saw Jiang Wang, he knew that Cheng Gongsheng had returned. He didn't want to get involved in this matter. Whether it was Cheng Gongsheng, Jiang Wang, or Yung Genzuan and Wang Yiwu, none of them were easy to deal with. But since Su Xiangqian had taken the initiative to greet him, he couldn't just turn around and leave. He just smiled and sat down at the head of the table. Then he teased. I was wondering why old Gao's Pai Shio was so generous today. So it was because of Brother Zhang's saber. Su Xiangqian smiled and sized him up. He didn't mock him. Li Longchuan asked curiously, "Why are you looking at me?" Su Xiangqian chuckled and said, "Let's see if you've been hit by the old madam." Li Longchuan's face turned black. "You, surnamed Su, I thought you didn't do it on purpose. So you were hiding it all along." When he left, he was indeed scolded by the old lady at home. He said that a disciple from Qingya Academy had something to ask of him, so he had to leave. Thinking about this, his teeth were itching. Su Xiangqian laughed out loud. They mocked each other and didn't hold back. It was obvious that they had a good relationship. Jiang Wang smiled. "Actually, I've seen the world with the two of you. This is the first time I've seen Linzi's famous 8-tone tea." He didn't hide his young and rich side. Li Longchuan also smiled. "Since we're here, we have to try all the 8-tone tea. Today we've disturbed Brother Jiang. Tomorrow I'll be the host and set up a table at Begonia Spring." Begonia Spring was one of the 4 famous pavilions. The people of Qi loved tea very much when they ate tea, vegetables, and rice. 8-tone tea was a top-grade tea. To a certain extent, it complemented the reputation of the 4 famous pavilions. However, Li Longchuan's words meant that they didn't owe each other anything. It was okay to interact with each other, but if they wanted to do something big, their relationship wasn't enough. For someone like Li Longchuan, the education he received from a young age was really comprehensive. It wasn't that they didn't feel like old friends at first sight and would go all out, but it was really rare. That was because they had to consider many things. The family gave them honor, so they had to consider what they could bring to the family. On the contrary, in the wilderness, it was more common to see casual heroes. There was no one better or worse. It was just that the way they considered problems was different. P.S. Mistress and Pipa are the details of the rich and great world. I really like it. Also, tomorrow afternoon, there will be no limit on novels. Everyone, help recommend more of our Qixin. Perhaps if the effect of this free recommendation was good, the editor would arrange other recommendations for him. Chapter 355. Speaking of which, I heard that Brother Jiang fought valiantly on the battlefield. I was filled with thoughts and spoke a few words. Seeing that Li Longchuan's words were clear, although Su Xiangqian wouldn't affect his decision, he didn't want the two of them to be too distant. So he took the initiative to liven up the atmosphere. Su Xiangqian was filled with thoughts. Jiang Wang looked at Li Longchuan, and Li Longchuan looked at Jiang Wang. The two of them didn't speak, but they had a tacit understanding at this moment. Look at you guys, you're all looking forward to it. Su Xiangqian was a little happy and cleared his throat. Before the two of them could stop him, they heard him recite, Great war, great war, great war, great war. Finished? Jiang Wang looked at Li Longchuan, and Li Longchuan looked at Jiang Wang. Su Xiangqian looked at Jiang Wang, and then at Li Longchuan. His meaning was obvious. It's over. If you want to praise him, then praise him. Logically speaking, Jiang Wang should praise Su Xiangqian for being so righteous. However, he couldn't bring himself to praise him. Thus, he could only say humbly, the victory of the Yang lands was due to Marquis Ding Yuanhu's ability to command troops. My meager contribution is not worth Brother Su's praise. Li Longchuan said the tea is not bad. These crude martial artists really made Su Xiangqian sigh. He felt like a bright pearl being cast before swine. So he just held his cup and didn't say anything. He shook his head slightly. His attitude was arrogant, meaning that the two of them could continue chatting. He didn't want to speak anymore. Jiang Wang braced himself and said, "Warriors are fierce and dangerous. Brother Su's words are full of pity. One can see how benevolent you are." Only then did Su Xiangqian nod his head proudly. "What is war?" Li Longchuan came from a family of generals, so he naturally had his own views on war. Dismantling words can be obtained, using weapons to conquer. No matter what the name is, it's all for profit. However, he wasn't willing to talk about Su Xiangqian's poem. Brother Li's words are very clear. Jiang Wang praised. After chatting for a while on this topic, Jiang Wang took the initiative to say, "In the Yang lands, I have something that I would like to ask the two brothers to evaluate." After saying that, he took out a storage box and placed it on the table. He opened it in front of the two of them and took out the mountain bow. The bow was heavy and thick. The body of the bow was glossy, almost like a mirror. The bowstring was like a cold blade, curved like a cold moon. He did not move, but it was as if he heard a trembling sound. "Good bow." Su Xiangqian blurted out his praise. Li Longchuan stood up immediately, his eyes shining. "Qiu Shan." In the Tao of archery, the Skybear Ji clan had once been as famous as the Stone Gately clan. How could he not recognize this world-famous mound bow? It could be said that to every bow user, this was the most precious treasure in the world. He had a vague guess in his heart, but he didn't dare to believe it. What kind of help could Chung Gung Sheng ask from him? Could it be that this bow would be given to him? This is the heirloom of the Ji clan of the Sky Hero Ji clan. Chung Gung Sheng and I acquired it after slaying an enemy. Jiang Wang then placed the bow flat on the table, allowing the others to examine it. This bow is a world-famous weapon. Unfortunately, Chung Gung Sheng and I are not proficient in the Tao of archery. For this precious bow to fall into our hands, it is a shame. What virtue do I have to obscure the light of this treasure? As the saying goes, rouge is given to beauties, a precious sword is given to heroes. The Qiushan bow is such a precious bow. It should be matched by a hero. Jiang Wang stared at Li Longchuan. Of all the people who know each other, only Brother Longchuan is worthy. At this moment, Su Xiangqian was not in a position to speak. Even though he had a belly full of inspiration to recite, he could only hold it in. Li Longchuan was silent for a while. Then, with great difficulty, he tore his gaze away from the Qiushan bow. "I have no talent and have not achieved anything. How could I dare to call myself a hero?" He forced himself to be humble, then couldn't help but glance at the bow again. He could only smile bitterly at Jiang Wang. Chung Gung Sheng and Brother Jiang are both heroes. Even when giving gifts, they are able to swallow mountains and rivers. But Longchuan really doesn't dare to accept such a generous gift. Li Longchuan really loved this bow, loved it to the bone. Even with his willpower and cultivation, he couldn't let go of his gaze. Jiang Wang knew in his heart that it was a success. "Brotherly, don't worry too much." Jiang Wang said, "I haven't been in Qi for long, but I've already seen many heroes. But when it comes to the art of archery, I'd like to ask, other than you, who else is more worthy of this bow?" These words were blunt, but they were also the truth. Someone like Li Longchuan naturally had the confidence to surpass his peers, especially when it came to the art of archery. The Sky Hero Ji clan had already lost its heirs. Who else in the entire eastern region could do better? And in the Stone Gately clan, although he was the youngest in this generation of direct descendants, his talent was publicly acknowledged to be above his brothers. But when one gives gifts to others, one must have a request. The Qiushan bow was such a valuable gift. How important was the request? If he was asked to kill Yung Genzuan with this bow, would he agree? Not to mention whether he could do it or not. Longchuan is ashamed, but Li Longchuan was just about to say something. Jiang Wang interrupted him. "There's no need for Brother Li to do anything. My brother Chongxian is giving you this bow for 2 reasons. The first is that he doesn't want a pearl to be covered in dust, and the second is that he wants to make friends with Brother Li. Since he had said these words in front of Su Xiangqian, there was no reason for him to go back on his word. In other words, Li Longchuan didn't need to pay any price for this Qiushan bow. Why else would people say that Chung Gongsheng's gift was capable of swallowing mountains and rivers? A world-famous bow was given to him just like that, without any promises. Of course, becoming friends with Chung Gongsheng meant that he would inevitably be standing on the opposite side of Young Ginzuan. But to what extent he wanted to go was completely up to him. If Li Longchuan had to worry about this, he would have to be as cowardly as a mouse and as fearful of Young Gunzuan as a tiger. He didn't want to get involved in the Zhenggenjia's fight over the family business because he was cautious. It didn't mean that he was afraid of Young Gunzuan. In the end, even though the Zhenggenjia was famous and powerful, his Li clan wasn't necessarily that bad either. If worst came to worst, Chung Gongsheng and Young Gunzuan would fight to the end. If they lost, he would step in as a friend and protect some of Chung Gongsheng's family business. Li Longchuan of the Sherman Li clan had enough weight to do this, so he would be able to fulfill his promise. His thoughts spun quickly, but he really couldn't bear to part with the treasured bow. He immediately laughed and said, "I am indebted to Brother Jiang and Chung Xian for thinking so highly of me. How could I, Li Longchuan, refuse?" Jiang Wang immediately offered up the Qiushan bow with both hands. "This is a treasured bow worthy of a hero." Li Longchuan first stood upright and cupped his hands in salute. "Brother Chongxian and Brother Jiang are so kind. Longchuan will remember it forever." Then he received the bow with both hands. This time, he couldn't let go of it anymore. Even his eyes couldn't stop staring. Even though he was talking to Jiang Wang and Su Xiangqian, he still ran to the bow from time to time. "All right." Seeing that Li Longchuan had made his decision, Su Xiangqian said, "I don't think you're in the mood to play around. Since you've got a new treasure bow, let's go test it out." Play around was one of the catchphrases of the second generation of Linzi's influential families. It had the meaning of playing with the heavens and the earth. Li Longchuan was tempted, but since the host was Jiang Wang, he went to see him. Jiang Wang naturally wouldn't spoil his mood. He smiled and said, "I'd like to see Brother Li's elegance." He immediately went to pay the bill. The three of them just sat like that for a while, drinking 3 cups of tea and listening to a song. The price was 100 Dao Yuan stones. When Master Jiang went to work in the Hu mine, his salary was only 1.5 Dao Yuan stones. Jiang Wang thought for a while. It would be too troublesome to report back, so he asked to put it under Chung Gongsheng's name. Fortunately, the name of Qingyang townsman was still useful. From another perspective, the House of Red Sleeves was also clear about his relationship with Chung Gongsheng, so they didn't object. When he returned to the private room, Su Xiangqian and Li Longchuan had already gone out to wait. Seeing that no one cared about the empty storage box on the table after taking away the Qiushan bow, Jiang Wang casually took it. The price was close to 1 million Dao Yuan stones. Chapter 356. For a family like the Shermanli family, they naturally had their own residence in Linzi. It was the city-destroying marquis residence. The Li family's city-destroying marquis title was hereditary and was sealed in Sherman County. Of course, it wasn't the entire county. There were only 3 cities. However, in all these years, when people mentioned Sherman County, they only knew about the Li family. With the Li family's prestige in Sherman County, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that the entire Sherman County was surnamed Li. The city-destroying marquis name was naturally to commemorate the Jiang family's revival and the Li family's ancestors' achievement in destroying the city with 10 arrows. In all these years, the Li family had produced many talents. At their peak, they had 3 marquises and were full of glory. However, only the city-destroying marquis was able to be hereditary. Just like the current Chongxian family, the hereditary marquis Baoang, and Chuliang's Dingyuan marquis title, there were 2 marquises in one family. However, after thousands of years, only the hereditary marquis Baoang could continue to exist, unless Chongxian Chuliang could make another great achievement and give the Zhenggenjia another hereditary marquis title. Speaking of the city-destroying marquis, Those who were familiar with history books couldn't help but think of the Marquis 9 returns. In order to commemorate the Zhang family's ancestor who fought 9 battles and returned 9 times and died of exhaustion, the Emperor of Qi Zhang gave him the title of Marquis 9 returns and allowed the Zhang family's descendants to inherit it. The Phoenix Fairy Zhang family was once famous. Unfortunately, they stood on the wrong side in the fight for the throne and were directly stripped of the title of hereditary and demoted to a count. Then, there was a general who surrendered in battle, and the entire Zhang family fell to the ground. Today, the Shermanly family's reputation didn't fall, while the Phoenix Fairy Zhang family almost had no descendants. Zhang Yong, the only blood descendant of the Zhang family, had shown his talent. He had joined the 11th prince, Jiang Wuqi. Presumably, he was also hoping to be promoted to the throne and help his family rise again. He had attracted the attention of many elders. The Emperor of Qi Zhang was an important stroke in the history of the Jiang dynasty. When the Jiang family lost their country, they went into exile as a hostage. When the rebellious forces in the country had already succeeded in seizing the country and began to confer merits and rewards, he made a sharp judgment that although there were many rebels, their hearts were different. Afterwards, he personally lobbied to borrow troops, scraping together 30,000 men and horses, and directly attacked the country. After 37 battles, big and small, they had not lost a single one, successfully reviving their country. 37 battles to restore the state. The evaluation of such a legendary experience was that it was even more difficult than establishing a country. It was also because of him that Qi was able to establish his position as the overlord and flourish to this day. Today, when the Emperor of Qi named his children, he used Jiang Wuzhou's Wu character. From this, one could see his ambition. It was not like he did not have the thought of comparing himself to the martial emperor. Let's not talk about this for now. The city-destroying Marquis Mansion was located on the prosperous avenue, a place where all the first-class sects gathered. The Li family had been a family of generals for generations, so there was a martial arts arena in their manor. The floor was paved with bricks and inscribed with formation runes. When ordinary soaring dragon cultivators fought, they would not be damaged in the slightest. Now that Li Longchuan had obtained the Mountain Bow, if he wanted to test the bowstring, he would have to find a master of the same level to spar with. Fortunately, he did not need to find another master, as Su Xiangqian was right in front of him. Not to mention how Jiang Wang opened his eyes when he entered the city, destroying Marquis Mansion. When he reached the martial arts arena, seeing that Li Longchuan was eager to try, Su Xiangqian immediately shrank back. Only then did he remember that he had purposely sent people from the House of Red Sleeves to invite Li Longchuan, causing him to be reprimanded. Although it was not a big deal, if they fought, it was inevitable that Li Longchuan would seek revenge. Although Li Longchuan might not do so, Su Xiangqian judged others by his own standards. He probably would. Therefore, he said, "Since it's a famous bow, I don't have a famous weapon with me, so it's not appropriate. Let's let Brother Jiang and you fight with famous swords." After saying that, he purposely looked at Jiang Wang and said, "I'm also empty-handed. Brother, ask that fatty if he wants to be friends with me. Brother Su is so charming. I think he wants to." Jiang Wang held back his laughter. Su Xiangqian wiped his forehead happily. "Then I'll wait for the letter." Li Longchuan knew about Su Xiangqian's abilities, but he did not know much about Jiang Wang. They might have fought in the Heaven's Secret Territory, but no one could remember. Besides, Cheng Gengsheng and Jiang Wang had become famous after fighting in Yangdi, so he knew that Su Xiangqian's abilities were not ordinary. But after all, rumors were false, and he could not be sure. If he fought rashly and lost his sense of propriety, he was afraid that he would hurt the friendship of giving the bow just now. Hearing Su Xiangqian's words, he looked at Jiang Wang questioningly. Jiang Wang and Su Xiangqian jested, then smiled and strode into the martial arts arena. He was not a shy person. If he wanted to try a bow, he would try a sword. Those who had entered the Heaven's Secret Territory were all strong people in the reaching Heaven state. Only 6 people were able to successfully pluck the divine ability. They could be considered the strongest people in the reaching heaven state. Of course, now that Wang Yiwu had broken the limit, he was fully deserving of being the strongest reaching heaven state since ancient times. He was one level higher than the others. As for the remaining people, they had all opened the heaven and earth gate and seen a whole new world. It was inevitable that they would want to test each other. Li Longchuan was also happy that Jiang Wang was so straightforward. He saw Su Xiangqian step into the martial arts arena with a long sword in its sheath at his waist. He held up the newly obtained Qiushan Bao and said sincerely, "Let me get to know it first." He immediately sat on the ground and held the Qiushan Bao with both hands. He closed his eyes and did not speak. He was using the Li family of Shimon's unique archery to test the Bao. This was not a slight, but a sign of respect. Jiang Wang also sat down cross-legged and held his sword across his knees. He only said, "Go ahead." He closed his eyes and rested up his mind. He and Sheng rushed all the way from Rizhao Prefecture to Linzi to gain face in the Four Seas Commerce Alliance. They had rested in the inn and were not at their best state. No matter how one looked at it, Li Longchuan was undoubtedly the top aristocratic family disciple in Linzi City. Jiang Wang also wanted to know where he was at his peak state in this 300-mile city. Li Longchuan and Jiang Wang did not immediately start the battle. Instead, one was resting up while the other was resting up. This was the greatest respect they had for each other. However, Su Xiangqian, who was waiting to watch a good show, was so bored that he started to yawn. However, this yawn was only halfway through when he swallowed it back down. "Madam!" Unknowingly, 2 people had arrived at the side of the arena. One of them was extremely beautiful and could be said to be a top beauty. However, he was very cold and very arrogant. He looked at them, but it was as if nothing could enter his eyes. He was extremely condescending. Su Xiangqian naturally recognized Li Longchuan's sister, Li Fengyao. However, what made his heart beat faster was the old lady that Li Fengyao was supporting. One must not look at how her white hair was like frost and how she looked kind. Based on what Li Longchuan said, when that dragon-head walking stick hit people, it dazzled the eyes and caused the wind to blow. She was the Li family madam, the birth mother of the current city-destroying lord, Li Longchuan's grandmother. Towards her grandson's good friend, the madam didn't treat him lightly. She said warmly, "Grr, there is no need to be so polite. Let's see if that red sleeves technique has loosened my grandson's strings." Since the madam wanted to watch the battle, Su Xiangqian could only smile and not say a word. Madam Li called him Gao, out of kindness. Naturally, he did not dare to be unhappy and did not have the chance to say anything. Moreover, when he heard the latter half of the sentence that was filled with killing intent, although he had a stiff smile on his face, his forehead was sweating profusely. Chapter 357. On the training field, the 2 youths sat opposite each other with different graces. One was nurturing his bow, the other was resting his mind. Their auras were already climbing. Outside the training field, Su Xiangqian felt uncomfortable. He found an excuse and said, "I don't know how long we'll have to wait. I'll go get an embroidered stool for the old madam." Old Madam Li waved her hand. The Li family has been a family of generals for generations. How can they just sit and watch? Su Xiangqian laughed dryly, then suddenly thought of something. He greeted the cold and arrogant woman. "Hello, Sister Fengyao." It wasn't that he was rude or intentionally ignored her, but the shadow she gave him was too deep, so he didn't dare to face her easily. Li Fengyao only nodded slightly and considered it as a reply. Old Madam Li looked carefully for a while and asked, "Which family's youth is that?" Su Xiangqian introduced seriously, "It's not any family. His surname is Jiang, and his name is Wang. He's a first-class talent." "Jiang Wang?" Old Madam Li pondered. A member of the imperial clan with a thin bloodline? Although the Jiang family was noble, it was only noble in the names recorded in the imperial register. After so many years, many people still had the surname Jiang but they had nothing to do with the imperial clan anymore. However, among the side branches, if there were outstanding talents who could rise up, they would naturally be taken back to the imperial clan and enjoy the benefits of the Jiang dynasty. It wasn't purely based on bloodline. It wasn't just the imperial clan. All the clans in the world were like that. Su Xiangqian explained, I met him in the Yu country. He's not from Qi. Old Madam Li felt unfamiliar, so she didn't say anything. On the other hand, Li Fengyao reminded in a low voice, when Long Chuan went to the heavenly secret realm, Jiang Wang was among the people who got the divine ability seed. Then there's that little fatty from the Zhenggenjia, the one who killed generals and seized flags with him and was rewarded by the imperial court was also Jiang Wang. Only then did old Madam Li have an impression. No wonder his bearing is not bad. Yes, yes. Su Xiangqian nodded. I'm friends with Long Chuan, so I naturally choose decent people. Being glanced at by Li Fengyao, he shrunk his neck and swallowed the rest of his boasting. It's starting. His spirits were roused as he broke free from the restraints of silence. He focused all his attention on the martial arts arena. On the other hand, Li Longchuan had closed his eyes for a long time, and he was already close to communicating with the bow of Mount Mountain. All that was left was to polish it over the years. He opened his eyes and said, Brother Jiang, you've been waiting for a long time. Jiang Wang just smiled. The two stood up at the same time, one holding a bow and the other holding a sword. This process was so slow that it seemed to show the spectators the transition between sitting and standing. However, for the two sides who were confronting each other, they didn't pay any attention to what was happening outside the arena. When they opened their eyes, the battle had already begun. A pair of valiant eyes, a pair of firm eyes, only had each other in their eyes. They were all outstanding youths. Which young man didn't have the heart to surpass his peers? When Jiang Wang stood up with his hand on his sword, his footsteps were unsteady. The arrow had arrived. As soon as Qi moves, the arrow will spontaneously move. When Qi moves, flaws will appear. It was referring to the leaf family of Shimon's arrow of Qi. This arrow was formed by gathering Qi and followed the flow of Qi. Extremely fast. Clang! At the critical moment, Jiang Wang held his sword horizontally in front of him, and the arrow of Qi just hit the sword. From a distance, it looked like a small beast with a translucent tail of Qi. It rushed forward crazily, but it stopped in front of the sword. Jiang Wang's hand holding the sword didn't move at all. The Qi was unpredictable, and it didn't change the mountains and rivers. This was the sword of mountains and rivers. With a shake of the long sword, the remaining power of the arrow of Qi had dissipated. Jiang Wang controlled the sword Qi, and his sword could change the sun, the moon, and the stars. The sword could travel the sun and the moon. It was also Jiang Wang's fastest sword. Li Longchuan's long hair rose and fell, and the Qiushan bow was held between his eyebrows. Boom! It was like a landslide and a tsunami. As soon as this arrow was shot, the mountains and seas changed. The arrow was shot from between the eyebrows, and its momentum was like a flood. It was the arrow of momentum. After opening the gate of heaven and earth, this arrow really had the power to change the mountains and seas. Like the mountains and seas, the momentum was rolling and crushing. Jiang Wang controlled his sword to this point, but it seemed that he had sent himself to the front of the torrent. He would be buried in the mountains and seas if he met the arrow with his body. The sword momentum changed immediately. Now, he could use the sword as he pleased, and he could use it freely. With one sword, the sea of people was boundless. When he reached Linzi, he saw what a sea of people was. After comprehending this sword, one would know the dense mountain of people. With the sea of people, one would respond to the mountains and seas. The sword and the arrow collided. There was a sound like waves crashing. It felt vast, as if one was listening to the sea. This attack should be an even split. Chirp, 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 chirp. Suddenly, the sound of birds could be heard in this tide. This sound was sharper than usual. It was more like the sound of boiling hot water. It was even a little ear-piercing, annoying the listener. Sound was also a kind of attack. Jiang Wang had never stopped cultivating. His control of the erupting flame sparrow Dao technique was getting deeper and deeper. In the past, when he used the erupting flame sparrow, one was the peck of the flame sparrow, and the other was the word explosion. Now, he had developed the word cry. He had truly completely mastered this Dao technique and unleashed it to the extreme. Densely packed flame sparrows flew around Jiang Wang and pecked at Li Longchuan. Before the pecks arrived, the sound had already attacked. Li Longchuan held the mountain bow and struck the bowstring with his fingers. Clang! There was the sound of the bowstring moving. Then, the sound turned into thousands of sounds, surging into the sky and the ground, in all directions. Bang, 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 bang. Flame sparrows exploded one after another. Even Jiang Wang himself felt annoyed, and his internal organs were affected. This was an invisible and intangible sound arrow. Hearing the sound, it hurt. Jiang Wang suddenly had an idea and immediately changed the Dao technique. There were many sound arrows and flame sparrows. Amidst the chirping sounds, a clang, clang, clang sound suddenly rang out. Su Xiangqian's ears twitched. This was the sound of the mistress Pipa, Cha's Pipa. Jiang Wang merged this sound into the flame sparrow's cry, directly using the cry to fight against the sound arrow. This was an extremely talented creation. After this sound was released, the annoyance in Jiang Wang's heart disappeared. He directly followed behind the dense flame sparrows and charged forward. With a thought, he released the 5-chi binding tiger. Li Longchuan had just released the sound arrow and placed it on the bowstring when he felt the 5-chi in his body become chaotic, trapped from the inside out. He was fearless. A flaming arrow shot out from his heart. The 5 internal organs corresponded to the 5 elements and gave birth to the 5-chi. The heart belonged to the fire element. Hence this was a flame arrow. Once this arrow was released, it immediately suppressed the internal organs and the 5-chi submitted to it. When this arrow was about to jump out of his heart, Li Longchuan immediately stopped the bowstring and retreated. Brother Jiang, you are so skilled. Today's fun is over. This heart arrow was an arrow that used one's heart to prove one's heart. If this arrow was released, it wouldn't be as simple as a spar. It would be a battle of life and death. Hence, he stopped the bowstring in time to avoid hurting their friendship. Although Jiang Wang wasn't satisfied, Li Longchuan's intentions were good, so he didn't mind. After all, the most important thing in this trip was to build a good relationship and not to fight for victory. He waved his hand to stop the Dao technique and returned his sword to its sheath. The outcome of this battle hadn't been decided yet. Although Li Longchuan obviously hadn't used his killing move and he hadn't used his full strength. In order to test Li Longchuan's arrow, he even hit a flame meteor that could quickly close the distance. He also hadn't used the newly learned jealous flame. Hence, he smiled. The Stone Gately family is indeed a family of heroes. Brother Li's few arrows are enough to make me admire your ancestors' 10 arrows. Li Longchuan couldn't help but smile, obviously very satisfied with his new mountain bow. Jiang Wang was also undoubtedly a strong opponent, allowing him to test a few arrows. At this time, he also let go of the unfamiliarity from before and laughed. Since we haven't had enough tea, let's do it now. Our Haidang, cough. Su Xiangqian coughed stiffly and squeezed in. Chapter 358. Begonia is still the same, green fat, red thin. Su Xiangqian sighed. It's sunset at the end of spring. How sad. Li Longchuan was in the midst of testing the bowstring earlier. Now that his mind was freed from the battle, he could finally pay attention to the outside. When he heard Su Xiangqian's attitude, he was already mentally prepared. When he turned around, he was already smiling brightly. Grandmother, how come you're so free to watch me practice martial arts today? The valiant young man gestured to Jiang Wang as he happily moved closer to old Madame Li. Old Madame Li hid a smile in her eyes, but she deliberately snorted. I'm free all day, but it's rare for you to be free, grandson. How could that be? Li Longchuan moved closer and very naturally took old Madame Li's other hand. He introduced Jiang Wang. "Grandmother, this is my new friend." Jiang Wang bowed properly. Junior Jiang Wang greets old Madam. "Good." Old Madam Li smiled. "I can tell you're a promising child. My younger brother is in the middle of autumn. What a cultured man." His voice was cold and distant, but for some reason, it made people want to get closer to him. Jiang Wang looked in the direction of the voice and saw a beautiful woman who seemed to be carved out of ice and jade. She was crystal clear and her eyes were distinct, but there was a hint of coldness in them. These words ridiculed Su Xiangqian for not being smart enough to save the situation. First of all, it was autumn, and it was too far-fetched to talk about spring. Second of all, the Li family had been a family of generals for generations. How could Li Longchuan have the temperament of a cultured man? Li Longchuan acted as if he didn't hear it. He only introduced her to Jiang Wang. "This is my elder sister, Li Fengyao." Jiang Wang bowed. "Hello, Miss Li." Li Fengyao nodded. "Thank you for your greetings." All right. Although old Madam Li would occasionally scold him, she couldn't bear to scold him too much. Since ancient times, it was said that the heavens love the eldest son, the common people love the youngest son. She patted Li Longchuan's arm with her wrinkled hand and said kindly, "You young people go play. There's no need to accompany an old woman like me. There's nothing to play with outside." Li Longchuan was usually a handsome young man, but in front of old Madam Li, he was very childish. When grandson is outside, I always think of grandmother at home. I don't know how you are feeling. I really want to walk around this courtyard with grandmother. It's good for Brother Li to accompany the Dowager Duchess. Then we'll go back first. Su Xiangqian took advantage of the opportunity. What a high price. Cold and heartless. I'm still trying to coax old Madam, and you just dumped her like that. Li Longchuan was furious in his heart, but he could only squeeze out a smile and say, "Then Brother Su, please be careful on the road. Please be careful of the carriages." He deliberately emphasized the word careful. "You're welcome." Su Xiangqian didn't seem to understand anything, so he pulled Jiang Wang. "Then old Madam, big sister Fengyao will leave first. We'll visit again another day." Li Longchuan was still calling out, "Then let me send you off, my friends." Su Xiangqian mercilessly pushed him back. "No need, no need. It's not my first time here. I know the way." After coming out of the Marquis estate, Jiang Wang found that his anxious mood because of Cheng Gongsheng's situation had suddenly calmed down a lot. It was probably because the young master of a top-notch aristocratic family, Li Longchuan, was comfortable and natural when he was with his grandmother. It made the onlookers feel at peace. This was probably the so-called joy of a family reunion. This was a feeling that Jiang Wang hadn't experienced in a long time. "What's wrong?" Su Xiangqian deliberately waved his hand in front of Jiang Wang and teased, "Are you thinking about Longchuan's older sister?" Jiang Wang still wasn't used to this kind of joke. How could that be? Su Xiangqian was used to being shameless. Now that he wasn't in front of them, he shook his head and said, "A fair and virtuous woman is a good match for a gentleman." Jiang Wang wanted nothing more than to gag him. "What nonsense are you talking about? We haven't gone far yet. Aren't you afraid that someone will hear you?" It was just a joke, but Jiang Wang's bashful side made Su Xiangqian excited. "What's there to be afraid of if someone hears you? She's beautiful, but you're not allowed to have thoughts?" "Yes, of course I'm allowed." At this time, a cold voice came from behind them. "Gao, why don't you tell me what you're thinking?" It was Li Fengyao's voice. Why was she behind them? They didn't know how many sentences she'd heard or where she'd heard them from. Jiang Wang and Su Xiangqian were both sweating, especially Su Xiangqian. His previous arrogance was completely gone, and he was completely listless. He said weakly, What thoughts? You don't have any?" He looked at Jiang Wang and said, "Do you?" "I have your mother." Jiang Wang almost couldn't hold back from cursing, but fortunately, he was a bit more magnanimous. He forced himself to ask naturally, "Why did Miss Li come out?" Seeing Su Xiangqian so cowardly, Li Fengyao let him go for the time being. She only said to Jiang Wang, "Grandmother said that since it's the first time we meet, we have to give the younger generation a gift." Presumably, They had left in a hurry, so the servants hadn't come to pick up the gifts yet. For such a prestigious family, there was no reason for them to keep guests and give gifts. That would only show that the host family was too arrogant and gave gifts as if they were giving alms. People like Su Xiangqian, who were familiar with them, didn't need to pay attention to such things. However, this was Jiang Wang's first visit. The Li family wouldn't be rude, so Li Fengyao chased after them. As Li Fengyao spoke, she handed over a jade box. The carvings on the box were jade green and lifelike. There was no need to look at the contents of the box. Just the exquisiteness of the jade box was enough to tell that the gift was extraordinary. Jiang Wang declined. It's already rude of me to take the liberty of coming here empty-handed. How can I accept such a generous gift from your esteemed residents? I don't understand these formalities. It's quite unreasonable for you to decline me. Li Fengyao spoke and looked at Su Xiangqian. Can you help me talk to the scholar? Su Xiangqian said, I don't dare decline an elder's gift. I was going to accept this gift. Jiang Wang wasn't willing to accept old Madame Li's gift. Most importantly, he was afraid that this gift was to repay Cheng Gongsheng for giving him the bow. He was worried that it would weaken their friendship. No matter how valuable it was, if Cheng Gongsheng's gift was given away for nothing, then this trip would be a failure. Su Xiangqian reminded him that this was only the Li estate's normal etiquette. There was no intention of drawing a clear line. Courtesy demands reciprocity. This was precisely what friendship entailed. Miss Li is such a celestial being. You shouldn't be delayed. Jiang Wang said, In that case, I hope you will accept it. He received the jade box with both hands. Li Fengyao nodded and didn't say anything else. She turned around and returned to her residence. Even after leaving the Li estate for a long time, Su Xiangqian still felt a lingering fear. That was close. Is Miss Li that scary? Jiang Wang didn't quite understand. In his opinion, although Li Fengyao was a bit cold and arrogant, she seemed to have a natural temperament. She didn't have any malicious intentions, so the audacious Su Xiangqian shouldn't be so afraid of her. One had to know that this scholar had dared to ridicule the Gao clan of Jinghai for relying on women to climb up the ranks outside the heavenly palace mystic realm. I only have one thing to tell you, Su Xiangqian said with an expression that said, the Yao in her name isn't the Yao of ancient sage kings, but the Yao of fine jade. She changed it on the genealogy records herself. Jiang Wang was inwardly speechless. One had to know that this wasn't an ordinary family. This was a hereditary marquis residence. Who would dare to touch the genealogy records of the Serene Li clan? Who would dare to touch it? But Li Fengyao did. She even changed her name. Chapter 359. If she changed her name on the genealogy, even if Li Longchuan was the favored youngest son of the main branch, she was afraid that old Madame Li would beat his head full of bumps. But Li Fengyao had done it. Not to mention his ambition, his ability was definitely not ordinary. Jiang Wang could only sigh. He's ambitious. Su Xiangqian knew that Jiang Wang had rushed to Linzi for an urgent matter, so he naturally wouldn't urge him to go somewhere else. Walking out of Changhua Avenue, the two of them went their separate ways. As far as Jiang Wang was concerned, he had already achieved his goal of delivering gifts, so he didn't disappoint. Zheng Genjia also had a marquis of Boang's residence in the Qi capital. It was a large family with a grand atmosphere, but with Yung Genzu in there, Cheng Gongsheng naturally wouldn't move in and cause trouble for himself. Earlier, when he came to Linzi to make friends, this fatty had spent a lot of money to buy a luxurious residence for his friends to drink and dine in. However, because it didn't have a noble history, this kind of residence was luxurious. But in the eyes of those truly prestigious families, it was still lacking in foundation. From this point, one could see the difference between Yung Genzuan and Cheng Gongsheng within the family. Yung Genzuan was already the young master of the marquis of Boang's residence. Although Cheng Gongsheng's status in the marquis residence was high, he still had to lower his head in everything. Linzi had 7 great scenic spots, and Red Cloud's Peak was one of them. Cheng Gongsheng's private residence was near the famous Red Cloud's Peak. Its value far exceeded that of ordinary mansions, and could be considered extravagant. With Yunganzu in there, he couldn't use the name of the Marquis of Boang's residence to the greatest extent, so he could only display his strength as much as possible. Wealth was also one of them. When Jiang Wang arrived at this residence, Sheng hadn't returned yet. But the servants in the residence had all received orders early on, so of course they wouldn't neglect him. Sunset Mountain didn't get its name from the rosy sunrise and sunset, but from the red maple leaves blooming all over the mountain like the sunset, hence the name Sunset Mountain. It was said that on the evening of the Mid-Autumn Festival every year, gazing into the distance at Mount Xia, one could see the marvelous sight of the sunset glow on the horizon and the red maple leaves of Mount Xia joining together. You have me and you. They mutually reflect each other's red, splendid for a time, hence the name Red Maple Clouds Are Not Late. Jiang Wang's room had an excellent view of Mount Xia by pushing open the window. It was an excellent location. However, this inevitably reminded him of the maple forest outside Maplewood City and the people in Maplewood City. Once, when the maple leaves were fluttering in the wind, he drew his sword and danced. That kind of pure time was hard to come by again. Years have passed in the blink of an eye, and the people who were by my side at that time. Jiang Wang leaned against the window, his eyes absent-minded. Tiger was in the army and managed to avoid that calamity, but they were unable to contact him again, and was being fostered in High Heaven Pavilion. No matter how attentive Yi Qingyu was, with her little sensitive mind, she couldn't avoid being confused, right? However, he couldn't even say that he had a stable footing now. Everything he had now could be lost at any time. No matter how reluctant he was, he couldn't bring her over. The maple leaves swayed in the evening wind. From afar, it looked like the waves of a Red Sea. The Mid-Autumn Festival was almost here. Jiang Wang thought and closed the window. He sat back on the couch and began to explore the 5 prefectures sea. Because there wasn't enough time and he was too anxious to bring in and back as soon as possible, he didn't even have much time to grieve. The most direct manifestation of the advantage of the heaven and earth isolated island was that when he rode the soaring dragon into the fog of obscurity, he could clearly sense the location of the heaven and earth isolated island. Because of its size, it wasn't easy to get lost. His mind sank into the soaring dragon Dao vein. As usual, he first sorted out the heavenly palace. There was a guest living in the heavenly palace, so he had to be cautious. The star-twisting python intimately circled around a few times before going back to the Star River spiral. Jiang Yan, on the other hand, was as steady as Mount Tai. The feeling of exploring in the fog of obscurity was very wonderful. The entire heavenly palace swam in the form of the soaring dragon Dao vein. His mind controlled it, and his body was like a dragon. Thus, he could clearly feel that the fog of obscurity was constantly eroding the body of the soaring dragon. He had to constantly use his Dao essence to repair the eroded parts. At the same time, he had to remember the feeling of swimming and constantly explore forward. Because there was no so-called direction in the fog of obscurity, there was naturally no front, back, left, or right. However, in order to not get lost, cultivators often had to simulate their own position. Jiang Wang was outside the enormous heaven and earth isolated island. He had the divine ability seed's beacon, so his position was relatively clear. Resisting the fog of obscurity was a matter of the entire soaring dragon realm cultivation process. With the scale of Jiang Wang's heaven and earth isolated island and the beacon generated by the divine ability seed, this process was much safer than ordinary cultivators. However, Jiang Wang still drew a relatively high warning line for himself. When his Dao Essence reserves reached this warning line and his repair speed started to be unable to keep up with the speed of erosion, he would immediately return. At this time, his essence, energy, and spirit were enough to support a soul-level battle. In other words, he had specially left room for Jiang Yan. Some cultivators said that the process of passing through the fog of obscurity was the process of soaking one's Dao essence in the fog of obscurity. This saying was not without reason. As the soaring dragon realm was constantly being eroded and repaired, it became the battlefield of the cultivator's Tao essence and the fog of obscurity. Tao essence itself was not a simple sublimation of qi and blood. It was the perfect fusion of willpower and strength. It was the true feedback of living beings to the origin of heaven and earth. It was the beginning of the great Tao, the foundation of all cultivation. As for the fog of obscurity that obscured the three souls and obscured the seven spirits, it corroded and obstructed cultivation. What was obscurity? It was uncivilized, it was ignorance. In fact, it was also the most primitive state. A person's cultivation began with Tao essence. The term Tao essence itself had the meaning of the beginning of Tao. In a sense, Tao essence was the end of obscurity. Therefore, when a cultivator could complete the exploration of the five prefectures see in the fog of obscurity, lock onto the positions of the five prefectures one by one, and completely clear away the influence of the fog of obscurity, they had completed their enlightenment. They had gained control of their own body, had their own room, and could naturally move from the inside out. Therefore, the next realm after the soaring dragon realm was the inner palace. The Buddhists often compared the mortal world to the sea of bitterness, and the human body to the lonely boat. In cultivation, it was the process of controlling one's own Tao essence and exploring the five prefectures see in the fog of obscurity. It was the cultivation of the soaring dragon realm. As the saying went, the body is like a Bodhi tree, the heart is a mirror. Constantly wipe away the dust, don't let it attract dust. It meant that in this process, one had to constantly repair one's own body and not let the soaring dragon realm be contaminated with too much dust and eventually get lost in the fog of obscurity. Of course, there was also the natural Buddha who said, originally there was nothing. Where did dust attract? They treated the fog of obscurity as if it did not exist. However, for ordinary cultivators, it did not have much reference value. And the Confucian sect said, how can one sweep the world if one does not sweep a house? In terms of cultivation, it meant that if one could not clear their own obscurity and complete their enlightenment, they would not be able to educate the masses. What it described was the barrier to entering the inner mansion stage. When Sheng returned, it was already night. He reeked of alcohol, and his face was full of fatigue. However, when he returned to the mansion, he dismissed the servants and entered Jiang Wang's room. His eyes suddenly opened, and his tiredness instantly disappeared. How was your trip today? Jiang Wang asked distractedly as he slowly wrapped up his work. Sheng said in a muffled voice, very full, very dirty. The soaring dragon realm broke free from the fog of obscurity and fell back to the isolated island of heaven and earth. Jiang Wang collected his thoughts. What's wrong? Zhongshuan Sheng's words were unhappy, but he was smiling. I've been given the cold shoulder for an entire day, and I've been snubbed. Chapter 360. After winning the Tianfu secret realm, Sheng took the opportunity to come to Linzi to manage it. He didn't expect that he would still be ignored. He took the opportunity to ask his uncle, Chongxian Chuyang, to make a trip to Nanyao City. He did everything he could to suppress the Qi's 14th prince, Jiang Wuyong, to announce his strength and determination. Ever since then, he had rarely experienced the feeling of being shut out. Even those who didn't get along with him didn't want to embarrass him. Moreover, he had personally instigated the Yang-destroying war, led the troops, and made great contributions. Logically speaking, no one in the imperial court dared to look down on him. However, he didn't expect Yung Ganzuin to make a move. It was a simple move, a real clash of forces, and it directly cut off his biggest profit after the war. The Jubao merchant's change in attitude was a strong signal in the eyes of those who were observant. It was a signal that Yung Ganzuin was taking seriously and was about to end this boring game. Who was Yung Ganzuin? For a long time, he was the undisputed successor of the top-tier Zheng Genjia family. Before Sheng appeared, No one could challenge his position. Yu Beidou, a top-tier fortune teller who was known as half a lifetime, praised him for stealing the glory of his peers. In Tianjiao, where the qi was as common as the clouds, how high was this praise? Regardless of whether Yu Beidou had the intention to kill him. Just in Linzi alone, how many proud and arrogant geniuses were there? Who would be pleased with such a title? However, after so many years, no one could beat him to the ground. Of course, there were people who didn't want to fight for the title, and there were people who didn't want to lose face with the Zhonggenjia. However, no one could deny the fact that all the geniuses who challenged Yung Gunzuin over the years had failed. They could refuse to accept him, but everyone had to take him seriously. The stronger Zhong Xianzun was, the less likely his competitors would be to win. Therefore, when Yung Gunzuin made a move this time, most of the connections that Cheng Gongsheng had worked so hard to build were silenced. Even the Jubao merchants kicked him and Jiang Wang out. It was predictable that Cheng Gongsheng would hit a wall in other places. With his fatty's intelligence, he knew the situation. Therefore, not only did Jiang Wang not sympathize with him, but he also bragged, "I ate a good meal, visited the house of Red Sleeves, and drank Mistress Pipa. City-destroying Marquis Mansion opened its doors to me and invited Li Longchuan to visit Begonia Spring next time." Zhong Xuansheng squeezed his butt into the chair, and a creaking sound could be heard. "You can't pay your bills here." Jiang Wang shrugged. "It's okay, I'll keep track of it. I'll keep it under your name." Cheng Gongsheng looked at him for a while, as if he was getting to know him all over again. "Brother Jiang, you've grown up very quickly. I'm even a little suspicious now. Did you get a kickback when you gave Li Longchuan a gift?" Jiang Wang blushed. "Madam Li gave me a greeting gift." Zhong Xiansheng was shocked. "You even saw the Li family's old madam?" "I happened to run into Li Longchuan when I was testing the strings." Jiang Wang took out a jade box and handed it over. Su Xianqian said that everyone has a greeting gift, so there's no exception. Cheng Gongsheng took the jade box and looked at it. He clicked his tongue in wonder. "This is Sherman grass. It's the only one in the world. Only Sherman County has it. This grass only grows on rocks and fights with the heavens. As the saying goes, grass grows on Sherman. It's tough and tenacious. It's a good spiritual medicine for refining the body." He handed it back as he spoke. "I want to open it to take a look. I don't want to waste the medicine. You have to use it as soon as possible." "How do I use it?" Jiang Wang asked. "Chew it raw," Cheng Gongsheng said unhappily. Jiang Wang wasn't familiar with it before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let go of the opportunity to improve his strength. He immediately opened the jade box in front of Cheng Gongsheng, took out the jade-like herb, and stuffed it into his mouth. He bit it, and the Sherman grass's liquid flowed out. It melted instantly and flowed into his throat. Then, it spread to his limbs and bones. Soon, strands of strength were produced. The process was very comfortable. It was as if he was taking a bath. Cheng Gongsheng said sourly. Although they both have it, Su Xiangqian studied under a famous scholar. He also came from Green Cliff Academy, like Li Zhangshu. His friendship with the Li family is naturally different. Madame Li gave you the Sherman grass, which shows how much she values you. Jiang Wang couldn't be bothered with him. He carefully sensed his body. After taking the Sherman grass, his physical body, which hadn't improved for a long time after the Four Spirits body refining technique, was strengthened by about 5%. "I didn't realize that you were so popular with the elders." Previously, the old monk from Xiankong Temple also desperately wanted to take you as his disciple. Cheng Gongsheng said in a mess. "Next time, I'll take you to see my father. You could just make him happy and let him leave the position of family head to me. It'll save me the trouble of fighting for it." Jiang Wang finished refining the Sherman grass and said unhappily, "Are we going to talk about business or not?" Alas, Cheng Gongsheng suddenly lost his strength and slumped back into the chair. "Do you still remember what you said to me in Qingyang town after the war? You said congratulations to me for winning the bet again." Cheng Gongsheng said somewhat dejectedly. "At that time, when I said that I didn't win, I thought that defeating Yung Gunzuin was just a matter of time. I thought that I had taken him seriously enough and never let my guard down. But now I understand that when facing this person, I don't fear him. Not being afraid is already looking down on him. Chung Gung Sheng said dejectedly, but Jiang Wang laughed. Why? Are you going to give up and admit defeat? I'm so fat. It's easy for me to get on the table, but difficult for me to get off the table. Chung Gung Sheng murmured. Now, I'm starting to fear him again. So, I'm going all out to face him, not daring to relax at all. It had to be said that when this fat man was serious, there was always a kind of heroism that came out of nowhere. Jiang Wang thought for a while and said, Li Longchuan accepted the Qiushan bow. He was very satisfied with this gift and also showed his sincerity to make friends. But I don't think he will do anything to Yungenzuan. No matter how expensive the gift is, it can't buy that kind of friendship. It's enough that he's satisfied. Chung Gung Sheng said, That's all I need. I don't need Li Longchuan to do anything, and I don't care if he will do anything. Let other people pay attention to this matter. This other people was, of course, Yungenzuan. However, could it be that he had sent such a valuable gift just to distract Zhong Xianzun's line of sight? How is that possible? But Chung Gung Sheng wanted to keep him in suspense, so Jiang Wang just let him be. He only asked, You didn't just walk around outside for a day just to freeload off the door, right? Chung Gung Sheng sneered again. Yungenzuan is so generous. How can I not let him enjoy the good results? How can I not give those people a chance to express their opinions? Other than my big face, who else can take so much dust? So, what are you going to do next? Sleep. Sleep? After I wake up, I'll go to the palace. Go to the palace. You'll go with me tomorrow. Chung Gung Sheng stood up from the chair with some difficulty and dragged his fat body out. My Zhonggenjia brothers are so friendly and respectful. His Majesty will definitely be happy. Chapter 361. Chung Gung Sheng said that he would enter the palace after waking up. Of course, he couldn't really sleep until late in the morning. It was still 3 in the morning, and the sky was still dark. He pulled Jiang Wang and hurried into the palace. King Qi was old, but he was still diligent in his governance. Before Yuan Feng, King Qi usually had a court session every 10 days or even every 20 days. Since he ascended the throne, he had a court session almost every day and only had 1 day off every 10 days. He had been doing this for 54 years. He was also a diligent king. Ziji Palace was the court session hall. In front of Ziji Palace, there was a pavilion called Donghua. King Qi usually sat in the dragon carriage and rested there for a while before entering the hall for the court session. Of course, King Qi didn't need to rest, but this was already a habit and etiquette. It was not easy to change. In more than 50 years of sitting in the court, King Qi was used to receiving some information about the court session in advance at this time. Chung Gung Sheng and Jiang Wang waited in Donghua Pavilion. Chung Gung Sheng was the son of an aristocratic family, but at the same time, he was also a commoner. Jiang Wang was just a man from Qingyang town. Just the qualification to wait here cost Chung Gung Sheng a lot of resources. The cost of this could scare a lot of people to death. As for whether the request for an audience could be delivered to King Qi or not, that was another matter. Whether King Qi was willing to see him or not was another matter. As for what happened before, Jiang Wang only knew about it when he arrived. The person guarding Donghua Pavilion today was a famous scholar from Qingya Academy, Li Zhengshu. His other identity was more obvious. He was Li Longchuan's uncle. Li Longchuan's biological father, Li Jingyan, was the legitimate son of Dowager Li. He was the current Marquis Guicheng. Li Zhengshu was the eldest son of a concubine and couldn't inherit the title. However, he was dedicated to studying and was now a famous scholar. Of course, in Qi succession, the legitimate son was a very important criterion, but it wasn't the only criterion. For example, in Marquis Boang's mansion, the old Marquis didn't consider his sons at all. He directly chose his grandson as the heir, and no one could question it. Qi Jun was sitting in Donghua Pavilion, as usual. Li Zhengshu, who was on duty today, said a few words to Qi Jun before handing him a book. It was the brief information that he thought Qi Jun would definitely see after screening. This was his right to guard Donghua. This was a great power, and it would be very useful if used well. Therefore, guarding Donghua Pavilion was a great honor. There was an unwritten but well-known title, which was Donghua Scholar. The low-ranking official of Donghua Pavilion had already reported to him that Cheng Gengsheng and the others were outside the pavilion requesting an audience. One could imagine the price the little fatty had to pay for an official to take the risk and spread the news to his ears. He had heard about the conflicts among the younger generation in the Zhongenjia, but he had never commented on it. The younger generation had their own world, and, at his level, they had their own circle. At this moment, the little fatty was waiting outside Donghua Pavilion. Whether he would speak or not was up to him. No one could blame him for this. Even Qi Jun himself had nothing to say. Li Zhengshu thought for a while and said in a low voice, "The young man from the Zhongenjia, Cheng Gengsheng, is outside the pavilion requesting an audience." Zhongshuan Sheng had given the Bao Mao Mountain to Li Longchuan just for this moment. The priceless Bao of Mao Mountain was in exchange for this sentence. This was Cheng Gengsheng's gamble. Cheng Gengsheng. Qi Jun stopped flipping through the book and thought for a while. Oh, the son of Buddha Tuesday. The topic was already a little dangerous, but he couldn't pretend not to know about the Bao of Mao Mountain that his nephew Li Longchuan loved so much. Li Zhengshu held his breath for 2 breaths before saying, "In the previous battle of destruction of his son, it was Cheng Gengsheng who led the troops to behead Jicheng. This time, Jiang Wang, who accompanied him, took the flag of the Sky Hero Ji clan." "Oh, not bad." Qi Jun nodded slightly. "What is the purpose of this audience?" Zhengshu doesn't know. However, Li Zhengshu reported honestly. Recently, 2 young men from the Zhongenjia are vying for the position of clan leader. There has been a bit of storm in Linzi. Qi Jun's face was expressionless, but he asked, "One of them is that young Ganzuin who stole the limelight of his peers. I didn't expect that the words of a fortune teller would enter your majesty's ears." Li Zhengshu's words contained a hint of remonstrance, but Qi Jun only waved his hand. "Didn't my son Wuxia lose to the disciple of the war god, Wang Yiwu? Didn't that Wang Yiwu say that he is inferior to Yunganzuan?" Li Zhengshu thought to himself, "Your son Wuyong also lost to Jiang Wang." Of course, he knew that Jiang Wuyong wasn't valued at all. Qi Jun probably couldn't even be bothered to pay attention to this 14th prince. Although he thought to himself, he said with a straight face, "That's just Wang Yiwu's self-modesty. In terms of cultivation state, Yung Gunzuin is naturally in the lead. However, the last disciple of the war god has broken the limit of the reaching heaven state and engraved his name into the milestone of cultivation. It's an honor for me, to Qi. The path of cultivation is changing with each passing day. Today will always be better than the past. Limits are meant to be broken. Sooner or later, they will be broken again." Qi Jun's words were understated, but they had a grandeur that surpassed everything. Then he changed the topic. "I didn't want to meet the son of the Buddha Tuesday, but perhaps old people are stubborn. Since this young Gunzuin is so powerful, I want to see if he will come crying because he can't beat him." He looked at Li Zhengshu and glanced at the frost on his temples. "Yu Langjun, do you think it's better to meet him or not?" When Li Zhengshu was young, his charm covered the entire country. He was known as Yu Langjun. Qi Jun addressed him this way to get close to him. However, Li Zhengshu didn't show any signs of arrogance. He only said, "It's up to you whether you want to meet him or not. You're too restrictive." Qi Jun thought for a moment and waved his hand. "Let's announce the meeting." When the eunuch finished announcing the verbal order, Cheng Gengsheng ran away without another word. Jiang Wang followed closely behind. Because they had to go to court at 5 in the morning, they didn't have much time to prepare for the meeting. Magic was forbidden in the palace. For someone of Cheng Gengsheng's size, it was very difficult for him to run. He couldn't care less about the impoliteness in front of the palace. He ran into the pavilion, panting. Jiang Wang was much more relaxed. However, he could only bow his head obediently and didn't dare to do anything else. He couldn't even see the decorations in Donghua Pavilion clearly. Usually, people wouldn't kneel in front of the emperor unless it was an important occasion, even if it was an official meeting the emperor. They were all standing at the moment, but their heads were very low. They didn't dare to look directly at Qi Jun. They could only see a corner of a purple dragon robe from the corner of their eyes. There was also a Confucian robe hanging by the side. It must be Li Zhengshu, or it could be someone else. At this moment, they heard an old but majestic voice say, "Why are you still running when you've run so hard?" It was Qi Jun's voice. Jiang Wang's heart tightened. Qi Jun's words implied that it was hard for him to run, and also that it was hard for him to chase after young Gunzuin. In the end, it would lead to the impoliteness of the emperor. Accompanying the emperor was like being a tiger. He didn't know how Cheng Gengsheng would answer. However, he heard Cheng Gengsheng take a deep breath and calm his breathing. Then, he replied respectfully, "It's hard for your majesty, so I don't think it's hard." Qi Jun snorted softly. There seemed to be a smile on his face. However, Jiang Wang didn't know him well and couldn't understand his emotions. "You're obviously working hard for yourself. How can you say it's for me?" Cheng Gengsheng's voice became more respectful. "The affairs of the world are your majesty's family affairs. Although Cheng Gengsheng is not yet 20, I still think about the affairs of the world. How can I not be working hard for your majesty when I worry about the world? P.S. A new week has begun. Vote as hard as you can. Recommend votes, monthly votes, and so on. Consider it as you worrying about the affairs of the country." Chapter 362. In Donghua Pavilion, Cheng Gengsheng spoke with assurance. Qi Jun sneered. "You're exaggerating. How old are you? How dare you say that you care about the world?" He was a little stern now. Jiang Wang thought that Qi Jun's mood changed too quickly. It was true that being with a king was like being with a tiger. He heard the fat man next to him say, with a loud voice, "Although this kid is young, he has led the war in the Yang country and solved the problem at the border, expanding the 3 counties at the border for the great Qi. Although I'm slow-witted, I'm grateful for the country's kindness. I serve the country regardless of life and death. Although I'm fat, I'm loyal to the country. I led the soldiers and took the flag for your majesty." As he spoke, he lifted his robe and was about to reveal the arrow that pierced Ji Cheng's abdomen when he killed the generals and captured the flag. At that time, the arrow went deep into his body. Cheng Gengsheng pulled it out in anger, and the wound became worse. However, he could faintly hear Qi Jun's laughter. Jiang Wang couldn't help but look sideways. He saw Cheng Gengsheng's fat trembling. The terrible wound that was left behind couldn't be seen clearly for a moment. It looked very inconspicuous. Cheng Gengsheng was still trying hard to peel off the fat to make it clearer. "Your Majesty," Cheng Gengsheng said without any embarrassment, "I'm fat, so it's rare to see an injury." Comrade Jiang Wang also participated in the capture of the flag in Yang. "Please be naked and reenact the battle for your majesty." Qi Jun's voice was a little strange. He seemed to be holding back his laughter. Approved. Chongxian Chuyang once said that Cheng Gengsheng was better than Yung Genzuin in terms of being thick-skinned. Jiang Wang thought so too. Why did he take off his clothes without saying anything? Why did he have to take off his comrade's clothes as well? Why did he accompany him into the palace? Just to be naked? However, Jiang Wang had no right to refuse, nor did he have the chance to speak. He didn't even have to move himself. Naturally, a eunuch would come over and take off his upper garment. Then in Donghua Pavilion, Qi Jun saw a young man stood with his eyes downcast. Because of the etiquette, he never raised his eyes. However, this person's eyes and brows were clean, slightly delicate and pretty. His face was calm and peaceful, and he did not seem to be very aggressive. Only his lips were slightly pursed, showing the tenacity in his bones. With the neck as the dividing line, above and below the neck were 2 completely different people. Above his neck was a handsome young man. Below the neck, his naked and fair upper body was covered with scars. Crisscrossing, knife wounds, gun wounds, sword wounds, there were new wounds and old scars. This was a warrior who had fought his way to this point, wielding a blade and a spear. He was not a teenager who had grown up under someone's care. With Qi Jun's eyesight, he could naturally see that those injuries were left not long ago, especially the blood groove on his abdomen. It was clear that an arrow from an expert archer had brushed past his flesh. His abdomen had almost been cut open. It was enough to show how dangerous the situation was. This was much more convincing than Cheng Gongsheng's wound, which was almost covered by his fat. "Bestow a purple robe for a warrior," Qi Jun said. Immediately, a palace maid brought a tray. On the tray was a purple robe bestowed by the emperor. She used her slender hands to drape the robe, which was as thin as gauze, over Jiang Wang to cover his scars. Jiang Wang still did not raise his eyes to look directly at Qi Jun. He only bowed slightly. "Thank you, Your Majesty." He was now a baron, so he had the right to call himself a humble subject. Qi Jun admired purple, and purple was precious. However, the purple robe bestowed by Qi Jun was naturally not ordinary. It did not just represent a certain level of honor. Its material was resistant to water and fire. Ordinary swords and sabers could not hurt it. When worn, it even had the effect of accelerating the condensation of Tao energy. However, why was it said that the emperor's heart was unpredictable? Qi Jun was silent for a moment, then asked, "Then, son of Fu Tu, are you here to praise me today?" Chongxin Fu Tu was the name of Cheng Gongsheng's father. This was a taboo that was inconvenient to mention. This question was direct and cold. Cold sweat seeped out of Cheng Gongsheng's fat neck. However, he gritted his teeth and said, "Cheng Gongsheng is here to ask for your majesty's reward for my meager contribution." However, he avoided the identity of the so-called son of Fu Tu and also avoided Qi Jun's warning. He directly spoke in his own name. It showed that all of this had nothing to do with anything else. The atmosphere froze. The entire Donghua pavilion was silent. Even Li Zhengshu was like a statue, not to mention the eunuchs and palace maids. As the saying went, thunder and rain are all gifts from the emperor. It had always been given by the emperor. No subject wanted it. Qi Jun's voice was calm. He only asked, "What do you want?" "I have a brother named Zun. He is extremely talented and has loved Cheng Gongsheng since he was young." When Cheng Gongsheng said this, Li Zhengshu couldn't help but glance at this fatty with some regret in his eyes. However, he heard Cheng Gongsheng continue. "Fortune teller Yu Beidou claimed that he had stolen the glory of his peers. So many outstanding talents have all bowed down to him. I also respect and love him. However, after 3 years, my brother has not broken through. People criticize him, and I feel regretful. Thanks to your majesty's might, Cheng Gongsheng fought bloody battles and was fortunate to have a small achievement. I dare to use this achievement to ask for your majesty's reward. Please allow my brother to enter Jixia Academy to cultivate for a year and break through. I respect and love my brother with all my heart." Hearing this, the regret in Li Zhengshu's eyes turned to surprise. Jiang Wang praised in his heart. Even Qi Jun raised his eyebrows. No one would have thought that Cheng Gongsheng would take the risk to ask for a reward not for himself, but for Yung Genzuen. No one could find fault with him asking for a reward for his brother. Moreover, it was an opportunity to cultivate in Jixia Academy. However, the important thing was time. After cultivating in Jixia Academy for a year, it would be difficult to ask about external affairs. In other words, Cheng Gongsheng would have plenty of opportunities to launch an all-out attack and plunder Yung Genzuen's assets and forces. And Yung Genzuen would not be able to resist at all. This was because he would have to cultivate in Jixia Academy for a year and be isolated from the outside world. This was a stroke of genius, a move by the otherworldly flying immortal. It directly overturned all of Yung Genzuen's plans and nailed him down. The only variable was Qi Jun. However, what reason did Qi Jun have to refuse? Qi Jun was silent for a moment before saying, "Who can say anything about a brother's filial piety? Since you have such intentions, I can't refuse." Chung Gungsheng knelt on the ground and bowed. I'm deeply grateful for your kindness. Jiang Wang also knelt on the ground. Qi Jun then said, Men, give his fat kid a purple robe to protect him from the cold. The admiration in his words was undisguised. Li Zhengshu originally thought that Chung Gungsheng was just relying on his merits to complain. Even if Qi Jun stood up for him on account of his merits, he would still lose his favor. However, he did not expect to take such a step. Everyone knew how ridiculous Chung Gungsheng's words were. Staying in the inner mansion realm for 3 years was considered wandering. Everyone knew that Yung Ginzuan was an inner mansion divine ability cultivator and had been polishing his divine abilities. He had already shown 2 divine ability seeds and was rumored to have cultivated 5 divine abilities. He was a heaven's abode cultivator. For such a person, the outer mansion realm was definitely not his limit. What he wanted was to fight steadily and steadily, step by step. Just this was already faster than too many people. However, Chung Gungsheng used the excuse that he was wandering in front of the outer mansion and very considerately sent him into Jisha Academy. However, as Qi Jun said, who could say anything about a brother's filial piety? Chapter 363. The Qi Emperor went to court at dawn and left at dawn. Before the court meeting, the king's grace would be sent to the marquis of Boang's residence. Thunder and rain were the king's grace. Punishment could not be avoided. Reward could not be avoided. Since the Qi Emperor had agreed to Chung Gungsheng's request to use his meritorious service on the Yang Nation battlefield in exchange for Yung Gunzuan's 1 year of cultivation at Jisha Academy, Yung Gunzuan had no right to refuse. Once the emperor's envoy arrived, he had to set off immediately. Chung Gungsheng's men did not rest. They rushed back to Linzi and repeatedly hit a wall. He did not hesitate to give Li Longchuan the world's famous bow, Qiushan, just to ask Li Zhengshu to say that this bow could have been exchanged for enough bargaining chips. He even hardened his heart and used the Jisha Academy cultivation opportunity that he had originally planned to leave for himself to trap Yung Gunzuan for a year. Needless to say, how many favors had he used in exchange for the opportunity to wait outside Donghua Pavilion? How many resources had he used to deliver the message to Li Zhengshu's ears? This time, the price he paid was not small, and the reversal was not easy. Of course, he would not miss such an important moment. After leaving Donghua Pavilion, he directly dragged Jiang Wang to Ji Gate. Ji Gate was the first gate in the southwest of Linzi. Among the West City gates, it was the first gate from south to north. Among the East City gates, it was the first gate from north to south. In other words, the Shi Gate faced each other. She was the god of earth, and Ji was the god of grains. The earth carried all things, and grains provided for the people. Shi and Ji were set by etiquette, and the emperor had to personally worship them. Therefore, Ji itself had the meaning of the world. The gate of Ji had its own important meaning. The east faced the sea, and the earth faced the sea. Outside the Jisha Gate to the west was the famous Jisha Academy. Qi Emperor operated Jisha Academy as the food that provided for the people. He saw it as the foundation of the country, and it was obvious that he valued it. He had heard of it for a long time. Ever since he came to Qi, the name Yung Gunzuan had appeared in his ears in various forms. Outside Ji Gate, Jiang Wang saw him for the first time. At this moment, it was still Mao Shi. The court meeting that would decide the fate of the entire country was still being held calmly. At dawn, Linzi woke up from the autumn night. Street vendors had already appeared sporadically on the street. Regardless of whether they were transcendents or mortals, everyone was busy with their own struggles. Jiang Wang and Chung Gungsheng were standing inside the city walls. Behind them, the city gate was already open. The guards at the city gate were fully armed and looked straight ahead. At the end of the street, a man in white walked over. His white clothes were not properly worn, as if he had just woken up. He had casually found a piece of clothing and draped it over his body, making it look rather messy. This was simply unimaginable among the aristocratic families who placed great importance on appearances. But when he walked down the street, it was like a pear blossom. The entire street was filled with his elegance. His sword-like eyebrows were slanted into his temples, giving off a sense of sharpness. His eyes were pitch black and bright, like the last two black pieces on a chessboard that determined the life and death of a dragon. However, the corners of his mouth were always curled up in a smile, as if he was some family's licentious young master, and yet this sharpness and fierceness was concealed. This made him easy to get close to. The thing that best reflected this temperament should be his nose. It was the kind of height that was like a bright green mountain, but it did not feel dangerous. His collar was casually placed because one could faintly see his jade-like collarbone and the bulging muscles beneath. Without Cheng Gengsheng's introduction, Jiang Wang naturally knew who this person was. Only now could he shift his gaze away from him and notice the Donghua Pavilion eunuch who was leading the way in front of him. This eunuch was not only here to deliver Lord Qi's verbal order, but also to supervise Yung Genzuan's immediate entrance into Jixia Academy. He could be considered to have some status in the internal court, but he was in front of Yung Genzuan and looked like a manservant. Zhong Xiansheng, who was fat, had a smile on his face, and looked somewhat harmless, was waiting at the city gate. When they got closer, he smiled and said, "I'm here to send you off, elder brother." Yung Genzuan stopped in his tracks and looked deeply at Cheng Gengsheng for a while. The corners of his mouth curled up. "My fat little brother, you really made me see you in a different light." Cheng Gengsheng opened his arms and showed his figure. "I ate so much so that elder brother doesn't have to look at me in a different light and can still see me." He was really ruthless. He gave up all his merits just to send Yung Genzuan to Jixia Academy to cultivate for a year. He had wanted to use the opportunity to cultivate at Jixia Academy to close the gap between his cultivation and Yung Genzuan's. Now, he had no choice but to give up this opportunity, which increased the gap between the two of them, all for the sake of catching his breath under Yung Genzuan's continuous attacks and counterattacking in one fell swoop. In a situation where he could not do anything, he simply gave up on his personal cultivation and chose to catch up in terms of power. It could be said that he had gambled all his gains from the Yang exterminating war in this round. To Yung Genzuan, he was sitting at home when an imperial edict came from the heavens. He was suddenly told that he had been rewarded with the opportunity to cultivate at Jixia Academy for a whole year. This meant that his series of attacks against Cheng Gengsheng had come to an abrupt end. Before he could make the final move to slaughter the dragon, the entire chessboard had been taken away. Then his opponent slowly made the next move, and he could only watch. He could not even see it. Cultivating at Jixia Academy for a year was indeed a great benefit. However, compared to the entire Zhonggenjia, which was more important, Yung Genzuan did not fly into a rage out of humiliation. He just smiled and said, "You should eat less in the future. Being too fat is not good for your body." Even though he was an enemy, Jiang Wang had to admit that this person was outstanding and was a first-class person. Cheng Gengsheng cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your concern, elder brother." Yung Genzuan returned the gesture. "I have yet to thank you for asking for my reward." Jiang Wang looked at this unusually warm scene. There were only 4 words in his heart: brother, 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 respect. Thud, 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 thud. The footsteps, which seemed to be constant and clear, came from the road near the city wall. Then an extremely tall figure walked over with large strides. He walked over from the faint morning light. It was as if he had cut open the sky. He gradually became clearer and more concrete. His black martial attire was simple and straightforward. Long face, high nose, and sharp eyes. It was the last disciple of Deqi's military god, Jiang Mengxiong, whom he had met outside the Heaven Palace mystic realm. He was the man who was known as the strongest Heaven Ascension state in the world and had broken the limit of Heaven Ascension state in the past. Wang Yiwu. This was something that could be predicted. Thus, neither Cheng Gengsheng nor Jiang Wang reacted much. Only Yung Genzuan smiled. It was a smile that was truly released. It wasn't that his previous conversation with Chung Geng-sheng was hypocritical. It was only at this moment that this kind of smile was completely from the bottom of his heart. It was a sign of complete trust in him. "I'll leave this mess in the city to you," Young Genzuin said with a smile, tilting his head to look at him. Wang Yiwu didn't smile. He only said, "Don't worry about your cultivation." Then, Young Genzuin didn't even look back. His white robe fluttered as he walked toward the gate of Ji. He walked casually and confidently. He didn't say another word. The eunuch of Donghua Pavilion didn't stop for a moment. After he gave the verbal order, he rushed to Marquis Boang's mansion. It would be disrespectful to Lord Qi to do anything under the eunuch's nose without his permission. Therefore, if he wanted to do something or had the opportunity to do something, he could only do it before the eunuch of Donghua Pavilion announced the decree. The fact that Zhong Xuanzuan was able to get the news before the imperial eunuch of Donghua Pavilion arrived was already very impressive, and he chose to inform Wang Yiwu. Chapter 364. Young Genzuin left gracefully, leaving Wang Yiwu in charge of the Zhonginjia clan's huge property. Looking at his back, Jiang Wang realized that Young Genzuin would be a shocking figure when he came out a year later. If he couldn't defeat Young Genzuin's forces in a year, it would be a waste of effort. By then, Young Genzuin wouldn't give Chung Geng-sheng any chance. But it was easy to say, but difficult to do. The guards at the city gate were still looking forward, and the vendors on the street were still busy. In Linzi, people were immersed in their own worlds. Countless stories and accidents were playing out. Wang Yiwu walked to Chung Geng-sheng at a steady pace, looking down at him. "Do you want to die?" he asked. Facing Wang Yiwu, the most powerful reaching heaven state, and possibly the most powerful soaring dragon state in history. Facing his death threat, Chung Geng-sheng just smiled. "Do you want morning tea?" he asked. Of course, he wasn't asking Wang Yiwu. Jiang Wang said, "Of course. Begonia Spring? Someone agreed to treat us. Let's go to another restaurant. Then let's go to the House of Red Sleeves. We can settle our old debts." Chung Geng-sheng said, "We've already drunk Mistress Peepa. We need to change to another kind of tea." They talked as they walked. Soon, they left the place. They ignored Wang Yiwu from the beginning to the end. Wang Yiwu was certainly strong. He had broken the limit of the reaching heaven state and left his name in the history of the cultivation world. How could he not be strong? However, whether it was Chung Geng-sheng or Jiang Wang, who was easy to deal with, no matter how strong Wang Yiwu was, could he make these two surrender without a fight? He wanted to show off, but he found the wrong person. There was no need to repeat how he had responded in the mystery land of heaven. Chung Geng-sheng's attitude was clear. "You want me dead? Bring it on." If Chung Geng-sheng came to the G gate just to show off in front of Young Genzuin, then he was underestimating him. What he wanted to see was Young Genzuin's ability. Thanks to his sudden and urgent action, Young Genzuin's response was hasty. Or rather, even a figure like Young Genzuin didn't have time to respond to the imperial edict. He just handed everything over to Wang's hands. This made Zhong Xuanzeng very satisfied. Early in the morning, House of Red Sleeves. The guests left. Many people were surprised that Chung Geng-sheng and Jiang Wang came to drink wine at this time. People were even more surprised when they explained the purpose of their visit and said that they were only here for morning tea. Although House of Red Sleeves had 3 of the best 8-tone teas, they had never heard of anyone coming here just for morning tea. This was a real brothel, the top money-squandering establishment in Linzi. Were the young masters nowadays so healthy? In any case, House of Red Sleeves wouldn't neglect their guests, let alone Chung Geng-sheng's status. After the two sat down, Chung Geng-sheng said, "When you wake up in the morning, you should listen to the bell. Why don't we have a cup of joyful drunken wine?" House of Red Sleeves had 3 types of 8-tone teas. One of them was joyful drunken wine, but it sounded like a bell. Jiang Wang had a headache when he heard it. He suddenly thought of suffering. "We are not monks. Why do we need to listen to the bell in the morning?" Chung Gung Sheng was silent for a while before he said, "It's not the bell of a monk. It's the chime bell." Jiang Wang realized that he had misunderstood. However, with his relationship with Chung Gung Sheng, there was nothing to be embarrassed about. He said, "Give me a cup." Chime bells were elegant music instruments. Only aristocrats could enjoy them. To a certain extent, it symbolized rank and power. Jiang Wang had never heard of it before. Although House of Red Sleeves was one of the 4 famous brothels, it was impossible for them to set up a set of chime bells to accompany their drinks. However, having a cup of tea that could make chime bells elevated the brothel's style. According to legend, there was a country that was famous for music. The Duke of Lu loved the music of chime bells. He often listened to the chime bells and drank wine. In the end, he got drunk in front of the chime bells. This cup of joyful drunken wine was taken from his classic. The teacup was shaped like a chime bell. However, the sound was crisp and clear, distant and melodious. It brightened the listener's mind. After listening to Chung Gung Sheng's explanation of the story, Jiang Wang did not understand at first why such music would make the Duke of Le drunk. However, when the tea stopped boiling and the song ended, he suddenly felt a sense of loss. This made him understand immediately. After wandering in such a bright and open world, one would feel more and more hopeless about the present world. When the tea entered his mouth, he knocked it against his teeth. It was as if he was striking chime bells. The beauty and brightness of the tea spread from his teeth to his entire body. Jiang Wang opened his eyes. His eyes were full of satisfaction and sighing. The reason why he could not forget the 8-tone tea was not only because of the enjoyment of drinking the tea itself. The most important reason was that when he was testing the strings with Li Longchuan, he tried to add the Mistress Pipa music into his Taoist techniques. This gave him a new idea about the explosive flame sparrow. This cup of joyful drunken wine was not a wasted trip. It made his mind intoxicated. Being powerful was a greater enjoyment. He was satisfied that he had a new idea about Taoist techniques. However, to complete this idea, he would probably have to drink a full cup of 8-tone tea. The price made him sigh again. If it were not for the fact that he could only drink 1 cup of 8-tone tea at a time to avoid conflict and lose the fun, he would have grabbed the opportunity of Chung Gung Sheng's treat and tried all of them. Chung Gung Sheng's first day back in Linzi was a complete failure. However, on the second day, he launched a fierce counterattack. In fact, after the failure of his first step in choosing the Jubao merchants, Chung Gung Sheng realized that his every move had been calculated. Conventional methods would not work. Thus, he made up his mind. He chose to enter the palace in the middle of the night to not give Yung Gunzuin time to react. The reason why he dragged Jiang Wang to the House of Red Sleeves so early in the morning was, of course, not just to anger Wang Yiwu. Instead, he deliberately enjoyed it with great fanfare and announced his victory over Yung Gunzuin. This was a very important move. It was also a very clear signal. Chung Gung Sheng went to the table and challenged Yung Gunzuin. Originally, he was invincible. However, it was all because Yung Gunzuin did not take it seriously. When Zhong Xianzun came back to his senses, as soon as he attacked, Zhong Xiansheng was forced to throw away his helmet and armor, and it seemed like victory was about to be decided. However, Chung Gung Sheng used the Heavenly Fairy and took away the chessboard. Next, he had to play with himself. Yung Gunzuin did not hesitate to change players. He left everything to Wang Yiwu and went to cultivate. Now, the game started again. Both sides sat down again. However, the opponent was changed from Yung Gunzuin to Wang Yiwu. It seemed that nothing had changed. Wang Yiwu was not an opponent to be underestimated. However, Chung Gung Sheng and Yung Gunzuin's competition was fundamentally about the Zheng Genjia clan's patriarch. No matter how strong Wang Yiwu was, he did not have the qualifications to inherit the Zheng Genjia clan. This was the absolute advantage that Chung Gung Sheng had in this year. He was happy to be drunk and finish drinking. Chung Gung Sheng asked, "I heard that Su Xiangqian wants to be friends with me." Jiang Wang said unhappily, "If you have any more masterpieces to give him, I'll invite him to a banquet in your name." And Li Longchuan, Chung Gung Sheng said, I'll invite people too. The Yin family, the Tian family, the Gao family, the Mo family. I'll invite everyone I can. Today, we'll drink. We'll do nothing but drink all day and party all day. It was necessary to let the cold-eyed onlookers see the change in attitude of each family. Jiang Wang knew the significance of this matter, so he only asked, "What about after you're sober? I'm going to find someone too." Cheng Gongsheng said coldly, "Su Fong. P.S. I've been writing the Red Heart Survey for half a year. I've been running naked for half a year. The limit just ended." The number of favorites increased by almost 3,000, but the average number of subscriptions only increased by 20. My mentality is completely unbalanced. My efforts and gains are seriously disproportionate. I haven't written a single word since yesterday. I still have 4 chapters left. I know this is not right, but I can't help it. Chapter 365. Cheng Gongsheng had invited many guests to his banquet, but not many of them were important enough. This was because he had just sent Yung Ganzuin to Jixia Academy, and those who did not pay attention might not have heard of it immediately. And among those who knew, after learning that his next opponent was Wang Yiwu, they might not have confidence in Cheng Gongsheng. Li Longchuan and Su Xiangxian had both arrived. Apart from them, only Gao Zhe from the Kamsi Gao clan and Yin Fu from the Beijing Yin family had come. Gao Zhe and Gao Jing, who had died in the Heaven Manor mystic realm, were cousins. Gao Zhe's uncle was the red-tailed prefectural governor, Gao Shaoling. He had the typical appearance of a member of the Kamsi Gao clan, with a tall figure, a wide nose, and wide eyes. He wondered how noble consort Jing managed to be so beautiful. And in the eyes of those who were observant, Yin Fu actually had a greater background. He was the grandson of the previous prime minister, Yin Ping. Although Yin Ping had been the prime minister for many years, he still had a certain amount of influence on the current political situation. As long as this old man did not close his eyes, no one dared to look down on the Yin family. Yin Fu's appearance was relatively gentle and calm, and he did not seem to be very aggressive. As for his nature, one could not judge without a deep relationship. As for the others, there was nothing much to say. The future scions of the other elite clans of Linzi City were either not in the same circle or, like the Bao clan, were already at odds with the Zhongenjia. Of course, these people coming to the banquet did not mean that they were completely on Cheng Gongsheng's side. It was just that after Cheng Gongsheng displayed his abilities, the outcome of the battle between him and Yung Ganzuin was once again uncertain. Most of the people didn't want to offend Zhong Xianzun, nor did they want to offend Zhong Xiansheng. For Cheng Gongsheng, returning to Linzi for 2 days would allow him to turn the situation around and achieve his goal. Although it could not be said to be perfect, this banquet was still enjoyable for both the host and the guest. Let's exchange cups of wine to rest, and I'll take my leave as a guest. In the past, Gong Sun Yi wrote about Linzi. How many years have passed, yet has never lost its luster. From the first rays of the sun until the darkness of the night, the guests either left or stayed the night. When the last guest went to rest, Cheng Gongsheng, who had been fooling around in the House of Red Sleeves all day and night, suddenly sat up. The beauty who had used her jade-like legs as a pillow was startled. "Let's go," he shouted. Imitating her, Jiang Wang also rested his head on her beautiful legs. In fact, his mind was immersed in the 5 prefectures sea. He immediately opened his eyes and stood up. He wasn't drunk at all, nor was he reluctant to leave. They left the House of Red Sleeves. Su Fong was a famous, arrogant scholar. He was most famous for scolding the Jubao merchants during a banquet, trampling on the reputation of this giant chamber of commerce. For a long time, the smell of money was tied to the Jubao merchants. Many people imitated him. When they saw the Jubao merchants, they deliberately covered their noses to show that it was too smelly. This made the merchants in the treasure-gathering chamber of commerce unable to raise their heads. At that time, the president of the Jubao merchants, Su Shi, laughed it off. Other than saying, bustling with activity, come for money, go for money. He didn't make any counterattack. Regarding this incident, there was actually a follow-up, but it wasn't that famous. Or rather, it was consciously covered up. Many people only knew that Su Fong was a fanatic and unruly. They knew that he had humiliated the Jubao merchants, but they didn't know the price he paid for it. They only knew that he suddenly disappeared. Other than when the smell of money was mentioned again, he never appeared in the aristocratic circle of Lindsay again. Until now, not many people still remembered that the smell of money was once used to refer to the Jubao merchants. Lindsay was the most majestic city in the world. It was the pride of the people of Qi, the city of glory. Almost all of the top aristocratic families in Qi had some business here. It could be said that more than half of the high-ranking aristocrats in Qi lived in this city. In addition, there were hostages from various countries, traveling merchants, scholars, and traversers. Lindsay accepted all of this in a very tolerant manner, forming a unique temperament. However, this city wasn't always glorious. Yulifang was undoubtedly one of the poorest places in Lindsay. It is said that a long time ago, this was a place where fishermen gathered. However, as time passed, the rumors slowly changed to the current Yu surname. However, there aren't many people with the surname Yu in this area. Cheng Gengsheng was also the guide and introduced this place to Jiang Wang. Both of them had disguised themselves. In order to hide their tracks, they didn't bring any attendants. However, with Cheng Gengsheng's size, he was too conspicuous in this poor area. Jiang Wang was wrapped in a black robe. When he heard this, he said in surprise, "Isn't Linhai County very far from here? How do fishermen live?" There were only 3 counties in Qi that were close to the sea. Jinghai County was one of them. However, it didn't have much coastline. Most of the coastline was in Linhai County. Who knows? Cheng Gengsheng shook his head. Perhaps Lindsay wasn't so far from the sea in the past. Perhaps Lindsay was close to the sea a long time ago. Time had changed, and the history was waiting to be unearthed. However, these two weren't people who were too curious about irrelevant things. Perhaps the people here were originally surnamed Yu. The so-called fishing district that Cheng Gengsheng spent so much effort to unearth was probably just a rumor. They didn't mention the possibility that there might have been fishermen living in the Z River. Since the founding of the Kingdom of Qi, fishing in the Z River had been forbidden. This was a prohibition written in the laws of the Qi Kingdom. It was very late at night. Every night was exclusive to the rich. Most of the poor went to bed at sunset. Because of hunger, cold, illness, and all kinds of other reasons, the long night was very difficult to endure. However, in Yulifang, there were some eyes on the side of the road. To be precise, the places on the side of the road were the homes of those people. Subconsciously avoiding the dirty water on the ground, Zhongshuan Sheng turned a blind eye to those faint gazes. Without the support of strength, no matter how evil they were just a joke. Although most of these eyes were filled with the purest evil, no one took any action. In their humble days, they had developed the instinct to live. The 2 men in black who dared to come to Yulifang in the middle of the night were not to be trifled with. Just like the rats in the sewer, their first reaction was to hide when they saw people. They had their own unique perception of danger. The feeling of stepping on dirty water with boots was not very comfortable. Jiang Wang didn't resist walking on air. However, "I thought Qidu didn't have these places," Jiang Wang said. "There are many opportunities in Lindsay, but not everyone is willing to open their eyes, be willing to walk over, and be willing to seize them. If it's just pure relief, emptying the national treasury won't be enough. Those small countries have fewer places like this," Cheng Gengsheng replied faintly. "Because these people have been eaten by ferocious beasts a long time ago." Jiang Wang was silent for a while, then asked, "Will Su Fong live here?" Resources were limited. Cheng Gengsheng didn't need to say this again. However, no matter what, Su Fong was still an extraordinary cultivator. No matter what, he shouldn't have fallen to such a place. Cheng Gengsheng stated without emotion, "His Taoist heart is broken. His heavenly cycle and heavenly palace collapsed. Of course, the famous scholar Su Fong wouldn't live in such a place. He wouldn't even pass by. However, it was reasonable for a disabled person to live here. It was a cruel statement. Chapter 366. The two of them walked through almost the entire Yuli Lane. The address and the information was not accurate. It was the innermost shack in the 4th alley north of Yuli Lane. There was only a dying old man curled up inside. At this age, it could not be Su Fong. Because he had never come into contact with Su Fong before, Jiang Wang's only Taoist technique of tracing could not be used. It was the same with Chung Gung Sheng. He was used to using heavy techniques to crush everything. Is the information accurate? Jiang Wang could not help but ask. This was done by Uncle Qi Ji. He was my uncle's old subordinate and used to be a scout in the army. It shouldn't be wrong, Chung Gung Sheng said, then suddenly slapped his forehead. It's not good to have small eyes. I've underestimated him. He was good at self-criticism. Many times, Jiang Wang wanted to mock him, but he had no way to do so. He did not care if people said he was fat or had small eyes. Moreover, he said it more often than others. You mean, although Su Fong is useless, his vision is still there. He might not have found out that someone was investigating him. But this is a good thing. It meant that he still had spirit and thought. Of course, this was a good thing. Chung Gung Sheng went back and found the shack. The old man was still curled up there. Chung Gung Sheng shook him. After a while, the old man opened his eyes. Where's the person who lived here before? Chung Gung Sheng asked. Among the dense wrinkles, it was hard to tell if they were dirt or old age spots. The pair of cloudy eyes just looked at Chung Gung Sheng. They did not move, nor did they have any intention to speak. Lifeless. This was the most direct way to describe him. It was okay to kill him. If not, he would live like this. There was no difference between life and death. All methods based on human desires and human nature would not work on such a person. Interesting. Chung Gung Sheng nodded. He turned and walked out. He woke up a beggar who was sleeping in a corner and asked directly, "Do you want to eat pancakes?" The only response he got was the sound of his stomach rumbling. Chung Gung Sheng turned around and pointed. Where are the people who live in the shack now? Help me find it, and you'll have pancakes to eat for the rest of your life. The beggar rolled his eyes but did not move. Obviously, he didn't believe it. Even though his stomach was rumbling with hunger, he had had enough of these nobles' lies and teasing. There was anger in Chung Gung Sheng's eyes, but he didn't do anything. With his status, he would not go so far as to argue with these people. It seems that building trust is not so easy. He looked at Jiang Wang and sighed. Jiang Wang walked over and looked at the beggar. Stand up. I'll give you an ingot of gold. The beggar was even more indifferent. Song. Jiang Wang unsheathed his sword and pointed it at him. Stand up, or I'll cut off your legs. This killing intent was so real. The beggar quivered and stood up. Jiang Wang sheathed his sword, took out an ingot of gold, and put it in the beggar's hand. It's yours. The beggar was in a daze. He didn't know what was going on. Jiang Wang said gently, You can check if it's real or not. Only then did he wake up from a dream and bite the ingot with his teeth. Now, help me find the person I want. If you find him, I'll give you another ingot. I don't care about the gold. I only care about whether I can fulfill my promise. The beggar didn't say anything else and ran away. Chung Gung Sheng clicked his tongue in amazement. You become much smarter after being knighted. Jiang Wang glanced at him. You're smarter than me, but you're very impatient. Yes, how could he not be impatient? In just a short year, under Wang Yiwu's watch, he had to defeat Yung Gunzuin's power. This was almost like a fantasy story. It seemed that the guests at the banquet were calm from morning to night. In fact, he was already burning with anxiety. He had paid an incalculable price to get Yung Gunzuin to leave the game temporarily. However, he had never really defeated Yung Gunzuin. After a year, Yung Gunzuin would return with a strong momentum and would definitely destroy everything. Jixia Academy was known as the Dragon of Earth, and Yung Gunzuin was a dragon. Aren't you anxious? Chung Gung Sheng asked. Of course I'm anxious. but I've already done the best I can. Outside of this, I can't be anxious. With your temperament, you're a seed for cultivation, Chung Gung Sheng said. When I was so small that I could only pick up a wooden sword, someone praised me like that. It's not a rare compliment. Jiang Wang was extremely calm. Aren't you going to chase after Su Fong? Chung Gung Sheng smiled and walked away, but his footsteps were not fast. If Su Fong had really gone into hiding and was still thinking about this world, he would definitely know that he could not escape those ghostly eyes that were wandering around here. After walking a few alleys, he heard a strange sound. Who's there? Chung Gung Sheng turned around and saw a black shadow emerge from the corner and run out. It was obvious that this was done on purpose, but Zhong Xiansheng didn't care. He stretched out his hand, and an invisible but tangible force pulled the black shadow in front of him. This person's hair was messy, and it was impossible to see what he looked like. His clothes were tattered, and his whole body emitted a sour smell. His eyes, however, were still very lively. Being pulled in front of Chung Gung Sheng, he did not scream in fear. He only asked with a hoarse voice, Zheng Ginjia? There was no need to ask who it was. Other than Su Fong, who else in this place could recognize the heavy technique? Chung Gung Sheng let go of his hand and let him fall in front of him. Mr. Su, I've been looking for you so hard. Su Fong panted twice and touched his messy hair with his hand. How do I look like a teacher? His voice was very hoarse, and it was so unpleasant that it made people frown. Chung Gung Sheng said with his hands behind his back, I'm willing to let you be, so you are. Even if you don't look like one, you are. No matter why you're working so hard, you found the wrong person. Su Fong lowered his eyelids and said without emotion, I'm just waiting for death now. I can't do anything. It looked like his heart was dead. Chung Gung Sheng asked coldly, Then why aren't you dead yet? You should have died long ago. But he was not dead yet, living a life worse than death, but he was unwilling to die. Naturally, it was because he was unwilling and hated in his heart. You can't help me, and I can't help you. Su Fong said, I'm already a cripple. I'm a cripple, so you can't help me. I'm a cripple, so I can't help you. Everyone could understand the desperation in his words. You were indeed a cripple before, but you're not that crippled now. Because I'm a person who can make a cripple useful. Chung Gung Sheng said. Su Fong said, I'm already a cripple. That is to say, before his current situation, he wasn't a cripple before. This was a tiny bit of self-respect that he kept for himself. But Chung Gung Sheng ruthlessly trampled on it. You're very cruel, Su Fong said. So, you should have a little more confidence in me. Chung Gung Sheng said. Su Fong let out a dry howl that was unclear whether he was crying or laughing. But he was afraid of startling someone and swallowed half of the howl. Not long after leaving Yuli Lane, Jiang Wang thought for a moment and asked Chung Gung Sheng and Su Fong to wait for a while. Then he turned back alone. When he found the beggar suddenly shrank back and looked at him very warily. He was afraid that he would go back on his word and come back to steal the gold. Jiang Wang looked at him and said, I specially came to find you just to give you a piece of advice. Hand over the gold, and you can live a good life for a while. Otherwise, you will die. No one in Yuli Lane believed in things like compassion. But this unusually clean young man looked so different. The beggar thought for a moment, then suddenly crawled in front of him and kowtowed repeatedly. Please take me away, sir. I'll follow you in the future. I'll do anything. However, Jiang Wang shook his head and turned to leave. This world is very cruel. You're useless. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.